It is now 1 p.m. I'd like to call the September 9th, 2025 Town Council meeting to order. If I could ask you to please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll? Here.
Here.
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Ms. Kay?
Here. I can't hear Stephanie at all. Or Petra.
Mr. Spencer?
Here.
Ms. Tillotson? Here. Mr. McClellan is
Thank you. The first item is the approval of the minutes from our August 5th, 2025 meeting. Those minutes have been circulated in advance for review by council members. Are there any changes or comments regarding the minutes?
I gave my comments to Petra already. No further comments.
Comments?
I submitted comments as well.
With the comments provided to the clerk by Councilmember Berner, the minutes are deemed approved. The next agenda item is the
Citizen.
what's that?
Citizen comments.
The citizens' comments, but I was going to say, what's their timing? I've got to watch our timing. Good of you to join us, Mr. McQuillan. Citizen comments on agenda items. Seeing none, we now move to our, do we have, where our present, oh, that's the old minutes. That's my problem. I'm looking at the old minutes.
Red Cross is here.
Presentations, but before we get into presentations, I'm going to do one little mayoral update in advance out of order, which is to acknowledge one of our own. He has some family business to attend to, so will not be able to stay for the duration of the meeting. But Jim Jordan, our wildlife biologist and director of our Wildlife and Natural Resources Department, is this week celebrating his 25th year with the town of Kiowa Island. And I've been privileged to not only be in the public sector here in the town of Kiowa Island, but having spent probably a dozen years or so in the public sector at the federal level, and headed a federal agency and worked on Senate committees. What I can truly say is Jim Jordan represents the best in public service, and we're very fortunate here at the town to have the benefit of his services over the last quarter century. So please join me in congratulating Jim on his 25 years. Thank you. We can now go to our presentations. Our first is from Megan Silsby, who's the Executive Director of the American Red Cross here in the region. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about what the Red Cross does for the area.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, members of the Town of Kiowa Council and the general public. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Megan Silsby, and I proudly serve as the Executive Director of the American Red Cross for the Low Country Chapter. I'm joined by my Board Chair, Ambassador Tom Carter. My goal today is simple: to give you a face that you put to the mission that we carry out every day. I'm honored to share how we're serving the Low Country region and to provide a face to the mission that we carry out every day. The Red Cross is your neighbors, your volunteers, and your partners in building a safer, more resilient community. Our mission is simple but powerful: to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of our volunteers and the generosity of our donors. You may relate the Red Cross to large-scale disasters, and rightfully so. We show up in force when storms wreak havoc across the Low Country and across the United States, but we also serve locally every day. In 2024 alone, we responded to over 300 local disasters, most of them home fires. We partner with local fire departments who call on us when one of our neighbors experiences a home fire so that we can come to the scene and provide the victims support. Home fires claim nearly 7 lives a day in the United States, but working smoke alarms cut that risk in nearly half. That's why we've installed over 1,000 free smoke alarms in the Low Country last year alone. Since 2014, this initiative saved over 140 South Carolinian lives. In 2024, we provided shelter, food, emotional support, and financial assistance to more than 1,000 people across the Lowcountry. And we do this at no cost to those that are affected, thanks to the generosity of our community and our volunteers. Just as we work to save lives and homes, we also help save lives in hospital. Our next line of services is one that touches nearly every family at some point, our blood services. The Red Cross is the largest supplier of blood across the United States, supplying over 40% of the nation's blood supply. In the Lowcountry, we hosted over 1,200 blood drives and collected more than 24,000 units of life-saving blood in the Lowcountry last year alone. And the town of Kiowa is part of that. We continuously run blood drives with the Kiowa Island Resort. In 2024, we collected over 71 units of life-saving blood. We're grateful for your town's partnership in our blood collection efforts. We actually have an upcoming blood drive on October 8th at the Kiowa Island Resort in the West Beach Conference Room. Of course, saving lives isn't just about what we do, but it's also about what we train others to do. Preparedness saves lives. Over 4,000 people across the Lowcountry last year learned critical skills like CPR, first aid, and AED use. We also reached over 200 students through our disaster preparedness programming. And while we serve the public, we also have a deep commitment to those who have served our country. Our support of military members and their families is a cornerstone of our mission. We proudly support our military community through the Hero Care Network, providing emergency communication, financial assistance, and behavioral health support. In 2024, we provided over 1,900 cases to military members across the Lowcountry. Behind all of this work is 696 dedicated volunteers, giving their time, energy, and compassion that make a real difference. So today, I'm here to help you see that the American Red Cross is a trusted local partner, an essential part of your community safety net. We're here before, during, and after emergencies, standing alongside the people that we support. But we can't do it alone. The community is as strong as our Red Cross, and it comes directly from you. That's why I'm eager to work with each of you to better understand the unique needs of your community so that the Red Cross can provide effective programming. Thank you for your time, your leadership, and your partnership, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Megan. Questions or comments from council members?
The only comment I have is Megan and I met with Director Harris, I guess a couple of weeks or so ago, and she and her Red Cross are going to start participating with the community emergency response team that I'm leading up. So she's actually coming to our next meeting in October. So the partnership has already commenced.
And what is the geographic area for the Lowcountry chapter?
That's a great question. So the Lowcountry chapter goes all the way up to Georgetown County, Williamsburg, all the way down to the Georgia border line, so the 9 counties within that jurisdiction.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Megan, for your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Megan.
We next have a presentation that Fran Williams will present on behalf of the Environmental Committee and the Go Green Subcommittee. Just a little bit of background and context on this. As you may recall, at the last meeting we had a discussion. It was not an agenda item for consideration of revisions to, or essentially a repeal and replace of our noise ordinance. One of the issues that was discussed at some length was potential restrictions or even prohibitions on the use of 2-cycle gas-powered leaf blowers. And we had some input from Roger Warren at the resort and a lot of comment from council members. Rather than put that agenda item on for this agenda for consideration at this time, we asked the committee's jurisdiction to do a little bit of background research, so to provide us with more information about the impacts of gas-powered leaf blowers, the trade-offs with regard to utilizing electric or battery-powered leaf blowers. I would also note that, as we'd mentioned previously, our town contractor is all electric, not just electric leaf blowers, but also all the equipment thus far. But with that background and context, Fran, very much appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and providing your assessment.
Thank you, Mayor Belt.
As he mentioned, the Go Green Subcommittee has looked into the use of electric versus gas leaf blowers for Kiowa. And we have come up with some background information as well as some recommendations. We've taken the leap to give you some recommendations. So we are a subcommittee of the Resiliency Committee under Madeline Kay. I am the chair, and you can see from the members that all of the larger Kiowa entities are represented on the subcommittee. We did that on purpose because we wanted not only their input, but their cooperation and participation. So you can see that they're all there. I'm not going to read you the slides. You can read the slides. So this is a comparison that we did. We started out looking at just gas two-cycle blowers and electric blowers. But the resort has moved to four-cycle blowers. And so we looked into those as well. And you can see the comparison numbers. I don't want to misrepresent these numbers. For the most part, they're averages, especially when you get to the four-cycle blowers. The four-cycle blowers, the numbers really have a wide range. So we just took an average. And we're going to show in the subsequent slides why sometimes an electric blower is better and sometimes a four-cycle blower is better than even an electric blower. So here's some regulatory trends. I thought this was important because other municipalities and government agencies are taking steps to limit the amount of gas blower use in their areas. And again, you can read this, but there's a couple of things I would like to point out. Some use the carrot and some use the stick. So in Montgomery County, they're providing $1,500 rebates to landscapers transitioning to electric. In the District of Columbia, they've banned gas blowers, and they're actually incentivizing neighbors to tell on other neighbors when they use gas blowers. So, you know, there's a variety of approaches here. I do think that there should be some incentive, especially for landscape contractors. And I think that's a big piece of the puzzle that needs to be addressed. There have been quite a few technology advancements in electric blowers. And again, they're listed there for you. They are more powerful than they used to be. They are quieter than they used to be. But they still come with some issues. And that is the entry costs are high, especially when you're looking at individual landscape contractors for homeowners. The maintenance is difficult of an electric blower, and in fact, the resort's experience and others is that if the leaf blower dies, you basically have to throw it away and start over. It's very difficult to do maintenance on an electric leaf blower. And battery logistics remain a big problem. So if you're a general landscape contractor for homeowners, you've got to have either enough batteries to last you the entire day, or you've got to have a solar-powered battery charger on your truck. So it's not so easy for some of those folks. And if you look at the resort and the golf courses and the amount of area that they cover, batteries become an issue. And not only do they die and have to be recharged, they die and they can't be recharged. And so we really don't know how many of these batteries are being recycled and how many are being thrown away. So in summary, there is a movement towards electrical leaf blowers, and there are some advantages to them. But you have to consider some of the cost, maintenance, and battery logistics when you move to an electric leaf blower. So we've made some great progress on the island to date that I don't think a lot of people realize. I do think that TOKI's move to an all-electric landscape company or contractor has been communicated, and I think from what I hear and from what the subcommittee hears, it's greatly appreciated. KICA has a one-crew pilot project with electric blowers with noise as their primary driver, and they want to expand that. If you look at the resort, 20% of their landscaping equipment has been converted to electric, but they are having challenges with the durability of the equipment, including the batteries. And so they are moving towards four-cycle leaf blowers. So we've come up with the bold idea of giving you some recommendations. And so one of the things we want to do first off is to have the TOKI landscape contractor come and talk to the Go Green subcommittee. You saw that KICA and the resort are members of that subcommittee, so they will hear from his experience. We want to share lessons learned and the solutions and options between TOKI, the resort, and KICA to increase the rate of conversion to either electric or four-cycle. We want to stay abreast with new technologies. It's changing all the time, and we want to stay abreast with that. But what we really think needs to happen is an island-wide strategy to convert from gas blowers to electric or four-cycle blowers, but we need to include the individual homeowners and landscape contractors in that strategy.
Thank you very much, Fran. Any questions or comments for?
I just have a question, Fran. If you had the opportunity so far, I'm just curious if you had an opportunity to talk to any contractors who use electric machines and what their pros and cons were. I don't know what they are, so that's why I'm asking.
I have not, and I don't believe the committee has. Several of them are here. If you have, you can speak up. But what I did too is speak to my landscape contractor who uses gas blowers. And he's not interested at all in converting to electric because of the cost. And he, of course, would then share that cost with the people that are paying him, and he believes they'd drop him.
Wow,
So
okay.
he's not interested.
Well, that might be true if it were him alone, if all had to, and that's maybe to your point of an island-wide solution. If
Exactly.
he was in the same boat as everybody else, then that would not be a differentiating factor or consideration.
Yes, and part of his concern is not only the sharing of the cost, it's the batteries and charging those batteries and having enough batteries and that type of thing.
Thank you, and that was very helpful. My comment's not necessarily about your presentation as much as what we're including in the scope of the discussion. And it keeps zeroing in on blowers, but weed eaters have the same problem. Electric saws have the same problem. They're being used for landscaping. And there are grassy areas all over the island too that need to be considered. And there are electric and other alternatives for those as well. So
Right.
thank you, but for the town, we need to incorporate all the considerations.
Absolutely, and I think if you can solve some of the issues around leaf blowers, you can solve some of the issues around some of the other equipment as well.
Absolutely. I think it's very often a similar or the same solution. I just want to make sure as we start developing language or strategies that we scope it all in.
I think the issue in which has animated many communities and municipalities and counties to address this, and particularly in Washington, D.C., which completely banned them, was primarily the noise issue and not just the decibel level, but the fact they put out two-cycle gas-powered leaf blower engines put out low-frequency noises, which and that'll penetrate walls. But it's also the broader environmental considerations, as well as the health concerns for those who are actually having to use the equipment all the time. This is information that's useful on board. I was trying to, and maybe I'll put these in for the record. Madam Clerk was looking at recent EPA studies, the Climate and Energy Center from the University of Pennsylvania and a few others that have pulled together a lot of data and analysis regarding these trade-offs. It does seem that the direction, my personal view is the direction we should head is ultimately banning the use of two-cycle gas-powered leaf blowers, both because of the noise pollution and the inefficiency of those. There are fewer issues with regard to four-cycle, as you know. There are issues with regard to electric-powered equipment. One of the things we might consider is both a carrot and a stick approach. Then actually a phased-in prohibition over a 6-month or year period, but provide financial incentives if they want to adopt the
Right.
technology.
Yeah, 100%.
Up front. But anyway.
So I have one other
yeah.
comment, Fran, if you could, the next stage when you get to look at this once again, I have an electric blower at home. It's a plug-in. It works wonderful, and I don't have to deal with the batteries. You just need a long cord.
And I had one more thought. Change is hard, and so I think incumbents in this community that have not made transitions or contemplated that, it's one more headache potentially, even if they have their heart in the right place. I think it'd be interesting to actually get some data from communities that have made the transition from community or from landscape contractors and find out how actually it really is working. I mean, the stuff I look at, and I've done a lot of yard work in my day, is pretty darn good. So, I think resistance to electric is perhaps subjective to some extent.
Well, I was just up in DC, but it isn't really leaf season right now. But DC is 800,000 people, and it has a much more prevalent deciduous tree landscape than does Kiowa Island, and they've been able to manage the transition.
Yeah.
So just two comments from me. One is on your subcommittee. Did you seek out any landscape contractors to be on the subcommittee?
No, because the Go Green subcommittee is broader than leaf blowers, so we did not. But in addressing this strategy that we're recommending, if council agrees and wants to go forward, then absolutely they would have to be included in developing that strategy.
Okay. And then the second,
Yeah,
cool.
go ahead.
The second thing I had is, I have a battery-powered leaf blower. I have a battery-powered, actually lawnmower. But what I have found is, this is my second leaf blower, is my concern is increasing in that about every year, maybe it's 2 years, they change the batteries. So you can't buy just a new battery. You have to buy a new battery, a new charger, maybe a new piece of old equipment. And the disposal of the batteries is my concern. So we have to think about that as part of the overall solution when you're thinking about reducing pollution.
Absolutely. In fact, the 4-cycle blower that the resort is moving to has just been discontinued. Right? So, I mean, that's part of the keeping abreast with the technology, is not just the batteries, but the leaf blowers themselves. It's a moving target right now. But I do think that technology will catch up to the desire to move towards electric leaf blowers.
And on your first point, Councilmember Farrell, you may recall that we had either 6 or 7 bidders, respondents to RFQ. All the major landscape providers in this area, and all represented that they would be able to accommodate the mandatory requirement of it. The only mandatory was electric leaf blowers. So it wasn't a gating item for any of the ones that do business.
I'm just thinking
right now.
about first suggestions or improvements or technology issues, or somebody who's on the front lines might be of some marginal benefit. That was just kind of where I was thinking.
Any other?
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Madeline, forgot about you. Sorry.
gee,
Sorry.
gee. Thanks.
Apologies.
So I would just like to make sure that, first off, Fran, thank you very much. Council needs to appreciate that this was very much an ad hoc request on the part of the Go Green subcommittee. It's not ever been a part of what they were charged with from the start. So when this whole issue arose, somebody just had the good idea that, well, let's use the Go Green subcommittee and ask them to take a stab at this, which I think, Fran, you've done a terrific job at. But if we're going to ask them to go on and do additional research, we need to have some fairly clear direction about what you want included in that research. Because again, Fran and her subcommittee are working on a lot of different initiatives. This was a one-off, and there are a lot of issues that come up with this. There's the battery disposal, which has always been an issue. There's the small contractors and the challenges that they would have in converting over. There's the carrot versus stick approach. So let's just decide specifically where we want to ask Fran and her subcommittee to go if we want them to take this on further, before it's kind of just an amorphous being.
Point well noted. Thank you. Thank you very much, Fran, for you and your fellow subcommittee's work on this. Thank you. Next agenda item is updates, and first is my updates, and there are several. One I've already dealt with. He hasn't departed us yet, but I think he will be very shortly. So I was actually away for most of this last month, very strategically timed to avoid a lot of issues related to town hall. So I think as the community is well aware, on a weekend, there was a valve over in a ceiling that burst and water poured into the town hall, and it was probably 2 to 3 inches deep in places, and went into the walls. It was a major, major project. To address that, it required putting in new carpeting, administrative offices, putting in new baseboard, doing some other replacements. I want to particularly commend on the staff, Brian Gottschalk and Michael Nardelli on our infrastructure and public works team, who were here, as I understand it, pretty much 24/7 for a period of time, addressing all these issues. From the council's perspective, Councilmember Berner, who really I asked to kind of take the laboring oar on this at the outset, which he did. And in fact, he had identified the likely cause of this even before actually.
That's the engineering degree at work.
And so everything's back in place. The issue is whether, we don't know what we don't know. There was some testing as to whether there are similar issues with regard to galvanic corrosion.
Galvanic corrosion.
Galvanic corrosion, which is something I learned for the first time. Two metals meshing that are not supposed to mesh,
Correct.
Different metals. And at least one other problem area was identified and mitigated.
Yeah, there was another location that was precariously close to bursting due to another issue of galvanic corrosion, where you have two dissimilar materials that shouldn't be together. Won't get into the details, but we observed it and replaced it. It also was about to bust. Concern I have is what's behind the walls.
Well, somewhat, and we don't have, it's probably not cost effective to simply open up
No.
every wall. So one of the things we're looking at, I don't see if Bruce is here, he's following up on this from the building department, is whether individual homes have water meter sensors and can do automatic shutoffs, whether there's a commercial application that's similar. The reason this became a problem is because it happened on a weekend. When nobody was here. If this had happened during the day of a work day, we could be immediately shut off the water then.
Yeah, I mentioned during Ways and Means also. That's a great idea. I mean, in my old house, we had a little sensor, smart things, that turned off the water automatically in $10 thing.
Okay. So anyway, we're back up and running, and again, thanks to the staff and council members, Councilmember Berner, for handling this issue during my absence away. A couple of other updates on the development front. I think we've generally tried to keep people apprised of what's happening in the town. Seafields is still on track. I think Bruce had indicated that a temporary certificate of occupancy is anticipated to be issued in mid-October. It's to start moving in materials into the facility, and that a certificate of occupancy for occupancy is anticipated later the following month, towards the end of November. There is some ongoing work with regard to putting in a retaining wall. Some of you may have noticed there's been a lot of flooding related to or runoff from the site that needs to be addressed, and we, and I think the town of Seabrook as well, has been working with Seafields to address that. MUSC facility right next door is looking, they've reached out to us about a potential ribbon cutting ceremony on mid-December. And so they're going to be open by the end of the year. Our hope is one of the next two council meetings, perhaps have Dr. Saj Joy join us, who is the CEO of MUSC in the Charleston area, to provide just not only an update on where they are, but also what may be of most interest to the community is what services will be provided there, primary care or specialist services, doctors that will have office hours at the facility. I also understand that Night Heron Park, the new activity center, is still slated to be open before the end of the year, maybe even in November. I don't know if many have seen the recent email blast from the resort, but they're already having people sign up for bowling league.
The bowling league.
Bowling league. So I've got to break out my old. No, I'm not going to do that. That's a kind of off island. I think I will commend Kika actually in their weekly updates have been providing a pretty good summary of some of the off island developments. South Market up across from the Ace, the status of Orange Hill, the Kiowa Island Club's new facility, as well as the flyover at Savannah Highway and Main Road, and even the Trident freestanding medical facility on Maybank Island. As I think everyone is aware, we've had an ongoing architectural design competition with respect to our proposed new Civic and Cultural Center addition. We actually received, the deadline for submissions was yesterday. We received three very interesting, detailed submissions. The selection committee will have an initial meeting with them, but more importantly for the community is there will be a community opportunity a week from tomorrow. I believe it is 3 to 5 p.m. here in the council chambers to take a look at all of the three submissions and have an opportunity to ask questions of each of the firms. It's actually not just firms, it's kind of a lead architectural firms, but each of the respondents put together complete teams. And so we'll have a chance to ask, everybody will have a chance to see what the potential is and provide some input to the selection committee, which includes myself, Councilmember Berner, Mark Permar, who's in the room, and a couple of other members of the community as well. So please put that on your calendar next Wednesday to September 17th from 3 to 5 p.m. I want to provide a little bit of an update. It's not so much an update, but update and reaction to some issues that were addressed at Kika's board meeting yesterday. And I see Kika board members here with us today. I certainly appreciate that. One is they simply provided an update. Was not Shannon, but Jody, I guess, provided an update on speed enforcement activities on Kika's owned roads. In addition to the town providing opportunity for additional off-duty deputy coverage, the community association also does the same thing, and they have done it in a very focused way, focused on traffic or speed enforcement on the community association owned roads, and they provided an update on that. As I've indicated in past town council members, we're also committed to improving the safety of our roads, Kiowa Island Parkway, Beachwalker Drive, Betsy Carson Parkway, and that's an emphasis for the off-duty deputies that the town retains as well. Two other issues that came up. One got a fair amount of discussion, and that's with regard to Kika's gate access policy, draft gate access policy. In one respect, as I spoke briefly yesterday, and I'd sent a letter to the Kika board prior to that. In one regard, this is uniquely a community association issue with regard to, who has access, with regard to members and guest access, the terms of that access, whether there are any fees associated with that. On the other hand, as I noted, the issues with regard to congestion at the gate and the location of the gate are issues that impact the broader community, and that both the town and the community association, as well as their stakeholders, have to address collectively. The one specific thing I noted from the town's perspective was with regard to what came across, whether it was really intended or not, was that the community association had some ability to control access by government officials in the exercise of their official responsibilities from accessing community roads. And I had pointed out, and I actually didn't talk to the town attorney, but I suspect he'd probably agree with me in this regard, that that under South Carolina state law, code enforcement officers, law enforcement officers, and other emergency personnel have the right to carry out their responsibilities in both public and private property, and there's not any real ability for KICA, just because there's a gate and they own the gate, to restrict the access of our building inspectors, our zoning administrators, and our code enforcement officers from carrying out their responsibilities in the municipality more broadly. And I think there's an appreciation of that, and it would be easily addressed. They were trying to squeeze us into a category along, that is, town officials, in a category with service providers and contractors, and said that just doesn't work. There just needs to be a clear exemption. But it was only a draft and a starting point for discussion. The other issue, which we probably need to have a little further conversation about at some future point in time, is part of a broader issue regarding what we want to have happening on the beach, and this dealing specifically with trash management on the beach and who's responsible for what. We had prepared a draft memorandum of understanding dealing with the management of trash on the beach, particularly the placement of trash receptacles and who's responsible for what. Right now, the town, the status quo is the town, what's the amount of our contract with about $84,000 or so dollars, a specific, in addition to our broader contract for trash management services with Trident. There's kind of a separate contract or separate line item for beach management, which involves them going on the beach, picking up trash one day, once a day, every day of the week during peak season, and a more abbreviated schedule in the off season. But all of those trash receptacles are on, or most of them, not all of them, are on KICA-owned property. There have been issues in the past. There have always been concerns about I've had concerns about liability-related issues, never been spelled out. This has always been an informal process. There's never been actually understanding any permission granted by KICA for the town to access its private property to place trash receptacles, or what happens in the event of an injury to person or property. And it was intended to address that. It was also intended to put some dual responsibility on both parties for managing trash on the beach, particularly on their property, in that we would provide the services that we always do, but if there were overflow issues, that KICA was ultimately responsible, as any property owners, for managing trash and littering on its property. There was also an issue with regard to, we tried to put in an obligation on both parties to cooperate when in advance of a storm, if it was necessary to relocate trash receptacles, move them off the beach, move them landside. And the reaction, I think, charitably, has not been particularly favorable from the KICA board. And so it occasions the question of, what do we want to do going forward? I mean, we don't have any obligation. We could simply require all trash to be removed off the beach and not get out of the trash management on the beach. I would note that, interestingly enough, the city of Isle of Palms has recently, because of both beach restoration efforts as well as high tide cycles, has begun moving all of their trash receptacles off the beach landside. Some of those are on the beach, had previously been allowed on the beach, were actually not on the beach. They were just on the land side of the primary dune, so that they wouldn't have to be moved in the event of a high tide or storm. One of the issues that the board had raised with me was that, well, you know, town should take on this obligation because the town gets all the revenues associated with beach franchise agreements. Well, that is true, although the beach franchise agreement revenue, which in the aggregate is probably a little over $300,000 or so, more than covers the cost of beach trash management, but we also spend probably $500,000 or more on beach patrol and other services. So it's not like the franchise revenues from beach-related activities are a money-making operation for the town. But we may have some conversation about is there a different allocation of kind of legal responsibilities as well as what the finances are associated with that. So to be continued, we may put this on for an agenda item at some point in time, but right now we're kind of in a stasis. And I just wanted to provide an update on what that is, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. Debris management, you can probably provide an update on debris management, Stephanie, during your update. Two upcoming things to put on everybody's calendar. One is as a result of the work of Meredith Blair and Caroline Wall and our communications public affairs team, and also, you know, expanding our arts and cultural event offerings for the community. This is not an arts council event per se. It's something put together by the town staff. We've been having conversations with various cultural and artistic organizations in Charleston to establish relationships or partnerships. And one of the ideas we've had is to have essentially a Kiowa night at these various institutions. And our first one is actually on the calendar now for October 21st with the Charleston Museum. I've never been there. It's actually a very fascinating place, but they've carved out an evening which will be dedicated to Kiowa Island residents. From 6 to 7:30, I believe, on October 21st. What the town will be doing is providing, you don't have to use it, but we'll be providing a van or bus for anybody who wants to go, doesn't want to drive, and maybe wants to get a cocktail before or after dinner. They can sign up. I think we'll have 44 seats available, so it'll be kind of first come, first serve on that. And Meredith and her team, we haven't put out any official announcement around this, but if you already want to get in the queue on that, let them know. The other thing is I have a kind of a quarterly, mostly quarterly, community town hall meeting. The next one will be coming up on Wednesday, October 8th. This one, in the spirit of working together to solve island-wide issues, Kevin Donlin, the KICA board chair, will join me at this community town hall. Again, similar format as is typically the case with these. Come and ask questions of interest to you, and we'll do our best to try to respond to them. So this one, they're usually in the afternoon. This will be in the morning. So I believe 10 o'clock on Wednesday, October 8th. And I believe that's the last of my many agenda items. Councilmember Berner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've already discussed my items, spent a lot of time with the flood. I was grossly concerned with mold. Spent a lot of time making sure that was not going to happen. And a repeat incident, as we already discussed, so I don't need to get into that. With respect to the design competition, I've received at least 2 of the 3 designs. I personally have not received the 3rd yet. I am so super excited about what I am seeing. It's going to be a spectacular facility, and it's going to be a jewel for the island. I can't wait to put the shovel in my hand and start constructing this thing. And then the last item, as I already mentioned, Mr. Harris and I met with the Red Cross a couple of weeks ago, and they're going to, in addition to today's presentation, come to our next CERT meeting. So even though my presentation here is pretty narrow, I had a lot on my plate, took a lot of time up, but that's what I worked on the last month.
Councilmember Kay.
Thank you. So it's, even though I've been in Wisconsin, my committees and subcommittees have been hard at work. Starting with Go Green, again, thanks to to Fran Williams for her leadership on this one. They've made significant progress on several initiatives, including shooting a podcast just this last Friday on composting. The broader resiliency committee is putting together a mass of information and educational materials that eventually are going to be building into a kind of resiliency library. So there's a lot of projects that are currently underway. But just a tip of the hat to Fran. She's been incredibly energetic and proactive and committed, and she's just been a great leader for that subcommittee. So there's good progress being made. Second thing I want to cover is the Environmental Committee, what we've been working on a lot over the last month. You all heard Mayor Belt report last month on the death of a juvenile bobcat. This was really disturbing news for a lot of reasons. First off, we got the necropsy report back, and it showed very high levels of SGA, second generation anticoagulants, indicating that they are still very much in heavy use on the island. And this is especially concerning because this bobcat was less than a year old. Data indicates that it spent most of its life, if not all of its life, on Kiowa. So this is a Kiowa issue, and it picked up enough SGAs in the 10 months that it was alive that there were very, very high levels recorded. Now, SGAs weren't the cause of death, we recognize that, but the bobcat was hit by a car. But the SGAs likely slowed that bobcat's response time, usually probably led to a weakened state. And this data has been shared with the South Carolina Department of Pesticide Regulation. So far, they have taken no action. So just a reminder here, folks, that the SGAs are a really dangerous rodenticide. And I know nobody wants rats in their house. I don't either. If rats move in, I'm moving out. But I've heard people say that they would rather have no bobcats than rats. Here's the thing, it's not an either-or proposition. There are very safe and effective means of pest control, starting just with rat-proofing a house. So we were doing a really good job of rebuilding our bobcat population up until about 3 years ago. But since then, community interest in bobcat protections dwindled, and our bobcats have suffered. It's time for us to reverse the trend, and we've got another subcommittee that we formed here to take charge of this, and they're working really hard on it. But it's not an issue that a subcommittee or just a couple of individuals can solve or can improve. We need the community to be involved. We need a lot of people to care enough to do something about it, and that means contact your pest control companies or become a bobcat guardian, sign the Bobcat Pledge. Remember that one of the best ways to control rats and mice is through a healthy bobcat population. They eat these guys. So we're kicking off this renewed push to preserve and protect our bobcats. You'll be hearing and seeing a whole lot more in the next weeks and months coming up. Speaking of dates that you'll want to put on your calendar, we have just firmed up November 7th for bobcats and bluegrass. There'll be music and food and drink and merch, so you'll want to be part of that. In the meantime, a big thank you to the members of this subcommittee who are working with me on this: Cindy Perry, Pam Wilson, Linda Leffler, and Jim Jordan, of course. And I want to add, just parenthetically, my congratulations to Jim on his 25 years. There's really no one that has been a greater help to me with the various projects that I'm working on council. Anyway, thanks to the subcommittee for the hard work they're putting in. We're going to need the community support, though, to make this thing work and to reverse this trend. So, more to come on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Farrell.
Yeah, I just have a couple things. First, at the end of June, we closed out our fiscal year end 2025. Just a couple of quick numbers. Our revenues were down about $1 million. This is predominantly from one special building permit that will be reissued probably this year. Our expenses were up, so it's very much a focus on managing our expenses going forward. And part of the issue going forward is going to be our interest expense is going to go down as interest rates have fallen as well. But we're still very healthy. We still, after all is said and done, we put away about $2.5 million into savings for long-term projects. I like the cultural activity center we've been talking about. So still a very, very healthy budget. First month into the year, we're, again, pretty much on target, slightly ahead in budget in terms of the revenue we took in, about 9%, and then slightly over in expenses, but only about 7%, so still a positive contribution there. Also, with the closing of the financials in June 30th, we were able to begin our fiscal audit for 2025, so that's a normal process that happens every year. But in addition, we also started our financial controls audit, something we've been talking about for the better part of this year. We've got pretty good indication that our audit or our assessment for our financial controls is very healthy. I'm supposed to have a conference call with the lead auditor either this afternoon or tomorrow, so more to come there. But we've started down this path, and I'm happy to say I owe Mr. Hennessy a response about the financial controls audit, but KICA is looking at also doing a financial controls assessment as well. So I think that's good for the community at large. And then the last thing is, I know you've heard from Mayor Belton and Councilman Berner about this Community Activity Center. We're going to focus primarily on the cost control of that. So please be assured we're not going to spend all of our money and all of our savings we've been generating over the past years. I'm going to have a tough look at everything they're spending money on and make sure it's spent appropriately. So it's something we can pay for out of accommodation tax revenue, so that's a good thing. And so there's, contrary to what Mr. Belta said, there are no new taxes coming. Just want to make sure you guys know that. No, so we don't pay taxes here in Kiowa, not directly anyway, and we're a long way from ever having to do that. So very healthy, both from last year and how we're looking this year, and with more focus on our controls and our financial situation going forward. So thank you.
Just on that last point, I would note that we would actually have the wherewithal to draw down on our accumulated surplus, which is mid 40 millions right now, and pay for the anticipated cost of the design and civic and cultural center in its entirety. However,
Many times over,
but our anticipation is, because we're able to use state accommodations tax dollars as well as the finances associated with that the addition itself would not require any drawdown on the accumulated surplus.
And we're looking at ways to finance that so that we can finance it over time and even be more cost effective. So a lot of different things to come on the Cultural Activity Center, but it's not going to be a financial burden.
Councilmember Spencer.
I only have one thing. And last month, I commented and brought up again this morning at Ways and Means, just for the broader council and for the record. The town exploring some strategic purchases, perhaps, of some parcels of land in the orbit of Kiowa's area that could affect the things that are important to the community of Kiowa, where maybe it would reduce traffic or improve aesthetics or improve the environment or things like that, and set up a program similar to the state and the county and others who have land bank programs where applications can be made, and then we set up a process perhaps to consider applications like that. So I just wanted to bring that up for the broader council as well, that I encourage that's something we take a look at pursuing.
And as we discussed at Ways and Means, it doesn't preclude us from pursuing things opportunistically now as they arise, which we've done in the past and will continue to look at. But that I think that suggestion has a substantial merit, Councilmember Spencer, and we should look forward to move forward with a task force or something similar. I would note that Kiowa Next, which we'll talk about here momentarily, does include some recommendations, for example, to establish a redevelopment task force. That may be the type of thing that we would want to embed in the comprehensive plan as well.
Thank you. And you know, timing, I think this is going to be a long-term problem, but I feel like every time I drive down Days Hardware, I'm seeing a new sign for a parcel for sale. So, and it's open for development. So, you know, when you think about congestion and ability to access Kiowa and the way we want to access Kiowa, there's probably some urgency to some strategic initiatives with that.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Stephanie.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of council. I just have 3 items to update. One is just a public safety report for the month of August. I'm doing this on behalf of Director Harris. Unfortunately, his mother-in-law is at the hospital, so he's there with his family. For August, again, for beach-related items, essentially the top 3 enforcement issues was dog leash, critical habitat, and glass. Between the 3 of those, we've written about between 11 citations and warnings between the 3 of those. And then general enforcement matters was short-term rental. Of course, August being a busy time, we had beach gear storage, permits and license verifications, rental inspections. Those were probably the top 3 enforcement related matters. And then from our public safety partner updates, the sheriff last month had a total of 59 stops, 46 were citations, 13 was written warnings, and then they had 1 domestic disturbance. In the St. John Fire Department, they had 39 rescue emergency medical incidents and 34 fire false alarm responses. In the Charleston County EMS, they had medical service response 33 and transports 22, and just other related notable matters that the sheriff's office had to deal with last month. Both of them dealt with people being intoxicated. They either lost their way or they got behind their car and I guess just sat there and fell asleep. So we had those issues dealing with public safety. As the mayor said, in regards to our debris site, I believe this was probably brought to y'all's attention maybe last month when I wasn't here, or the prior month. We, the town, we had an approved debris site. So historically, DHEC was the ones that approved your site. They would come out, they would say, yes, that site meets their requirement. Both sites, we moved essentially south of Kiowa Island Parkway. Both sites belong to the resort. One site, we lost that because that was going to be the future Andel West site. So we then moved across the street from there. And we had to stop using that site because there is some zoning matters that the resort is currently working through with the county. So we had to find an alternate location. We were looking potentially at sites in Johns Island, possibly purchasing sites or maybe a long-term lease. But we found out that some municipalities actually work with the county. I believe it's their Public Works Department. I'm not quite sure which department that is, the Public Works Department, in terms of having an intergovernment agreement that allows municipalities to work with the county and use the county's debris sites. The county throughout, or county admin throughout the county, unincorporated areas, more than likely, they have lease properties throughout the county so that if they have to activate those sites, similar to what we had to do with the resort, they have to activate those sites, they can do so, and they have at least maybe 1, maybe 2 on Johns Island. I'm not sure the exact number. So right now we're working with them, and it appears that we have an agreement that the town attorney reviewed that will allow us to partner with them. So if for some reason we have a named storm, this agreement states that the county would come in and essentially they would do our pickup for us, and they would transport it to their site. The agreement allows the town to do our own pickup. We just give them 5 written day notice in advance that we will pick up the debris ourselves. But if we do that, of course, we have to find a site to be able to store it. So the good news is that we are working through this with the county, and we believe that we will have a resolution for at least this year. And long-term, we can continue looking for sites ourselves somewhere on, on Johns Island, that we can either, council can look at, acquiring it somehow or doing some sort of long-term lease. So this year, I think we're okay. But, right now, I think the Atlantic is quiet, knock on wood, so hopefully we don't have any incidents this year.
Stephanie,
sir.
what size property were we using for the resort here across Mandel West?
Well, it was their entire site. It was a tomato site, but I'm not sure how large their site was, but our portion that we used was a very small compact. Do you know about how much of their total site that we used?
We were using about 5 acres.
About 5 acres?
Okay.
Which is the minimum that you need from FEMA regulations.
I thought it was 3 acres. 5 acres is the minimum?
No, you're right.
It's
Sorry,
3.
3 acres is the minimum that you need for their FEMA regulations.
And is it FEMA or DHEC that approves the site?
DHEC.
Approves it, and then FEMA, you have to have that approval from DHEC before FEMA will move forward with looking into reimbursement.
And it's short-term storage, right? You just put it there and then you have to grind it up or remove it or do something with it, right?
Correct. Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions regarding that? I just have one more.
I just think one of the issues we look forward to, I mean, this is the type of thing that you hope you never actually have to use, and most seasons you don't. So, generally having a lease option, which you may not have to pay much for because it's not likely to be used, would be most cost effective. What we need to explore is if there were a 3 to 5 acre site somewhere in Lower Johns Island, would there be utility to that parcel above and beyond just debris management, but might, warrant acquiring that, assuming it was a reasonable cost associated with that. And that's something we'll continue to explore and bring back to council.
And just one thing I want to kind of push for the community, if you're not, if you haven't signed up for the Johns Island Advocate, I encourage you to do so. They put out a lot of good information about things that's going on Johns Island. I want to just highlight on September 11th, they have, at the council meeting, there was a upzoning of Kane/Road. The Planning Commission denied that request on August 11th, but even with the recommended denial, it can still move forward to County Council. It's on that agenda for, I believe, September 11th. They have a number of other items on the agenda for that day. They're going to talk about the transportation sales tax program. So there's a lot of good information that is put in that Johns Island Advocate. So if you have not signed up for that newsletter, please do so. You can Google that name, and it'll probably pop up, and you can sign up for that newsletter. They give you a lot of good information. That's it.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next agenda item is old business, which is our cell tower ordinance, and this would be for second and final reading. I invite John and perhaps Councilmember Spencer to kind of provide a recap of where we are, and there are some procedural and substantive issues that I think as we've discussed, there's a framework for addressing all of those. So, gentlemen.
Yes, good afternoon, members of council. This is second reading for this proposed ordinance addressing communication towers. This is section 12-103, conditions of use under our zoning code. First reading was given last month. Just to recap, to Mayor's point, there were no sort of comments that were presented at first reading over the last week. We've received a few comments from members of council and the mayor regarding potential tweaks to the existing code. So what I'm going to do today is make a recommendation from staff that we do have a second reading approval with some minor changes, and then at some subsequent time address some what I would call more substantial things that would advance the particular ordinance through approval today. And so just beginning with those few what I would
Sorry, Mr. Taylor, just so I'm clear, you're going to recommend we approve this today, but you still have some changes you want to make down the road Is that what you're
Correct, and I
saying?
think the mayor will elaborate to some additional changes, correct, yes.
And we can get into that. The conundrum we're in a little bit, and Councilmember Spencer can address this, is, some community-wide desire on the part of the Planning Commission, and I think this council, to get the ball rolling with regard to upgrading our communications infrastructure in the town and not inordinately delay that. If we made any substantive changes, town attorney can, provide kind of the best characterization of this. If there were really substantive changes between first and second reading, then we'd have to send it back to the Planning Commission. So as to avoid doing that, I think what the planning administrator will propose are some formatting as well as minor changes that would not give rise to be incorporated as an amendment today, that would not give rise to the need to send this back to the Planning Commission. And then, as I've discussed with Councilmember Spencer, and I worked through with John and Stephanie, identified, and it's on me, I should have thought about some of these things before, some more substantive issues that there's no reason that they have to be addressed at this point in time. We can, and there's, I think, general agreement to come back at a subsequent meeting and consider those at that time.
So we're just not waiting for the perfect. We're going to get the good in place,
That's
and then
exactly
we're going to make it perfect later. I think that's a great approach.
Are there any other comments before I kind of walk through some of those potential or recommended changes here? Beginning, and I'm just going to go through essentially page by page so that you can kind of get a better understanding and track. On the first page, 1 of 6, under the tower heights provision, the sentence reads, the height of tower shall be measured from the base of the tower to the tower's highest point, inclusive of any antennas. Staff is recommending that we add natural grade after tower so that it's consistent in measurement of that tower, so that essentially we'll be able to have consistent application of tower height from at grade to its tallest point, opposed to any inconsistency of where that measurement is.
And just to clarify on that point, not that it is likely, but if the desire, and I think the community's desire is that to allow up to a maximum of 150-foot height, that you wouldn't have somebody come in and build a 50-foot tall mound of dirt and put it on top of that, or put it on top of a four-story building or something.
Yeah, I understand your comment, and I agree to it, but I still have a question with respect to the height measurement. I go back to, in engineering, whenever you're measuring the height of a building or a distillation tower or a smokestack or whatever, it's always from the slab. And I wonder if the industry standard for towers would have the same standard. I would suspect they do. If you're putting up a 150-foot tower, the industry would say, well, that's from the slab.
Your slab is typically going to still go on to natural grade, so there aren't.
Slab's going to be above natural grade. Because something of that height, you're going to need very big, very strong anchor bolts, and you're probably going to have base plate elevated up.
Yeah,
I would expect it would be I don't think it would be at grade. I really don't.
What I would say, I mean, we don't have I meant to begin the conversation with our representatives who were kind of along the process with us through this entire time. Was unfortunate to make it today regarding Kimberly, who represented Crown Castle. She had some family emergencies to deal with, so she wasn't able to make it. But they've supported the language as currently crafted. But
not the one with that grade. That grade's not in here.
Okay.
We're proposing to
Well,
add.
that, I know, I'm bringing it up, that I'm not sure that's
So I think
proper.
I think what we're trying to do is, it's about visibility. So you could build a slab 6 feet above grade and then 150 feet above that. You could say 140 feet above the slab. I think we're really talking about what's the natural grade and 150 feet above that, inclusive of the slab.
Makes
sense?
No, I understand what the intent is, because Brad doesn't want somebody to come along and put a mound of dirt.
Sure.
And you get another 4 feet or so. I understand that. But I just wonder then if the industry standard is measuring it off the slab, if that would then reduce the tower height by whatever
might reduce it by, I mean, it's practically then 144, then
I just
150.
think
I'm not sure
we're,
that- yeah.
I'm not sure,
Well, but I think
I'm
part,
not sure
part
we're
what
doing the
we're
right
trying to
thing.
address is the reason I think we're focused on the 150 both solves for the technology or the tree canopy constraints, but we're also trying to make sure that we don't go, you know, we're a certain amount above
I
the tree
completely,
canopy.
I completely understand it. I'm just wondering if we're putting a restriction on this that is unique, not standard in the industry.
I didn't want to put you on the spot if you wanted to share what you just whispered over. This is Mr. Jonathan Yates, who was part of, one of the representatives through the process. He said that they're comfortable with natural grade as being within.
All right, so if he's comfortable with it, that's great. I just was raising the question. I didn't say it was right or wrong. I was just asking what's the standard.
We can
That's- Okay, that's end of debate.
If you were to flip to the next page, under 2 of 6, regarding the organization and structure of the ordinance, under subsection 6, zoning permit submittal requirements, as the current ordinance is crafted, it actually combines what we would identify as submittal requirements as long as standards or minimum things that need to be met prior to any approval. So it's recommending just to be split out to 2 different sections, one being zoning permit submittal requirements. These would be things that the applicant would actually have to submit for review. So as you see, a site plan drawn to engineering scale, et cetera. Those things that are aligned with actual physical documents or resources that will be for reviews, support materials, those would remain under section, or become now new section 7, and section 6 would become minimum requirements. And those minimum requirements I've identified in the following items. Beginning at D, and it'd actually be beginning the second sentence, the proposed tower must be located no closer to residential structures than 200 feet. That's an actual standard, not necessarily a submittal requirement, so that would become a new section. Item F, a similar distance requirement of must be located at such adequate setbacks provided all sides to prevent the tower's fall zone. That's again, another standard that needs to be met. Letter G, regarding co-location, those are additional standards. H, which addresses, again, the distance that a tower should be separated from an existing tower, 1,000 feet. That would be another item. I, which the proposed tower shall not be illuminated, or shall only be illuminated as required by the Federal Communications Commission, or FAA. And then J, communication tower shall contain a sign no larger than 4 square feet, et cetera. And item L, which is regarding the removal of towers which do not meet requirements. So all those elements are listed as items that would need to be a standard. So staff is recommending that that become its own section, section 6, and then section 7 will remain the other additional items, which are actual submittal that they would submit into the portal for review.
So that would be a non-substantive change, so that, Mac, that would not be something that would have to go back to Planning Commission, correct? It's more of just an organizational issue. John, I appreciate that. We discussed this at some length, and just so everybody kind of, the issue was, you started out with substantive provisions, which is the tower heights, co-location, stealth tower design. Then you went into procedural issues, but you embedded then a bunch of other substantive requirements into the procedural elements. But John, I might suggest, and I don't know if you have an amendment already prepared, what you said solves for that. My preference or suggestion, we don't have to go there, is that we actually just have at the beginning all the substantive requirements after purpose and intent, and then all of the substantive requirements be under cell tower communication requirements. First one being tower height, and
Yeah.
then so on and so forth. So all.
I think that's a minor thing that we can adjust to just the labeling of that and just bucketing all of those provisions under the same
Does
thing.
that make sense?
Yeah, I'm all
Okay,
for that.
Okay, all right.
Can I ask one question about section D, about the distance from residential structures? I'll ask my question first. What are you trying to accomplish there? And the reason I ask is the insertion of 200 feet will only become relevant if the tower height is below 100. So when you do the math, a 150-foot tower is going to have to be 275 feet away from a residence. So yet the tower height has to be not 150, but it has to come down to 100 before the 200 comes into effect. So do you need it 275 or 200, or what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so the discussion there became, should we add a metric for not just anything that's proposed at 150 feet? If there's something lower, should it be a minimum requirement? So that's where that 200 came into play. To your point, we probably won't see that 200 become in effect, because if the tower companies do propose 150, they're going to need that greater 275 feet minimum. So this was recommended by Planning Commission. It kind of went back and forth, and it kind of landed in here. It's not a great rationale for what I think you're asking, but what I would say the minimum standard would be the later of that or clause, which is the greater distance equal to 1.5 feet for each height. So that would be the more restrictive in most cases.
So then the second part of my question is there some industry standard, or what's the rationale for 275 feet? If that's what it's generally going to be?
So the original had considered 150 feet, and we went back to 200 feet, and that just became sort of a medium number for the Planning Commission, the subcommittee that discussed raising potential distance, because we were going from essentially 120-foot towers to 150-foot. They thought the need to increase the distance between residential areas. This doesn't, in fact, contemplate the fall zone requirement, so they still would need to meet, an applicant would still need to meet the fall zone requirements outside of that. But the minimum distance, I would say, for a residential structure is to reduce the impact on existing neighborhoods. So if the areas of concern where we know our current towers are located, most of them are sited on golf courses or away from residential. There are a couple sites where we know that there are, like, for example, the Berkeley site, where we know residential structures are pretty close to that. So any future improvements to those types of sites, this ordinance would not accommodate those. They would more than likely require variance or some of that nature. But it does give the few sites that we know of immediate need the ability to move forward with their conceptual or plan improvements to date.
And then the last part, and I'll stop, I promise. So is there what's the need for space beyond the fall zone? Is it just aesthetics, or is there some, energy issue that you're trying to minimize, or Lisa?
If you step in, then I'll come back behind.
If I may, and for the record, Jonathan Yates.
Yates, thank you for coming.
No, I'm glad to be here, and I thank this council, this mayor, and the planning commission, and John and his team for all the hard work getting into today. I actually wrote part of that provision years ago. Your existing ordinance came from the county ordinance, the Charleston County ordinance, and back in that time, that was in the late 90s, we were doing a lot of cell tower ordinance, and typically the setback, you'd have a fall zone setback to your property line to make sure in case of a catastrophic 500-year event, the tower would come down inside that property. And then a lot of ordinances talked about an aesthetic setback, that if you have residential, perhaps you should be the height of the tower away. When we were working on the county one, as always, as you saw how this process worked, anything by committees, back and forth, we're going to have a round table, a square table. In the end, with the county one, we just came up with 1.5 to 1 plus 50 feet. So it was just a number we came up with at that time as the aesthetic setback. The safety setback is with the fall zone. And as we move further, you see less and less in that, but it was just the time when this was being done.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Yates, I have a question for you, please, in a
Yes,
different matter.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't see in this current draft anything related to inspections or maintenance. And I'm just thinking of a situation where a storm comes through, a level 1 hurricane perhaps, or whatever it is. Does the industry inspect the towers on their own? Or should
Absolutely.
we have an inspection requirement in here?
They're constantly inspected by the tower owner, and also because they have to keep them up, particularly after a high wind event. There's a meeting inspection, because we have to make sure a high wind event, generally, a lot of folks are relying on us for their communication, so we got to get the site back up. But there's constant inspection to make sure that they're
Right, so
maintained.
the industry takes care of itself. All right, I just wanted to make sure somebody was.
But-
Because
but
we have-
Trust but verify, but maintenance-related, decommissioning, drop and swap, and issues related to that are some of those substantive issues, which, if we tried to incorporate now, would
Okay.
would require sending it back to Planning Commission. It is my expectation that we'll bring back to council.
So that's all right, but Mr. Yates
yeah,
responded
yeah.
favorably anyway,
Yeah,
so
yes,
that's.
yeah.
The one other thing I would add is, and I don't know how it is today, but back in the day, when it was all American Tower, they would finance these towers, and then in the finance agreements, in the indentures that I used to buy, there was always a maintenance portion in there that they had to be inspected, some routine that the bank required. So there's also that financing aspect of it in there too. I don't know.
Yeah,
how it
we,
is with
and
your company.
basically, the tower builder, say like a Crown Castle, they have a duty, because they're supplying a platform to licensed carriers to broadcast in their market. They have a duty to make sure that the platform is stable at all times. Not only the platform, but the compound is free of debris, and that they can carry out their communication function.
Great, thank you.
But one of the things I think we'll want to embed is not just, in a sense, an operational maintenance or stability.
Oh, no.
But also an aesthetic maintenance component into this as well. Now, if it's galvanized steel, that's one thing, but if it's a painted tower, then, we don't want, if you look at the one, I think that is in, at Cougar right now, it's pretty sad.
And those are the ones we want to get rid of.
Yeah, sad looking. But we don't want to get to a point where that's.
Of course, yeah.
That's what's happening. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
John, please continue.
Any additional points on that? Then also on the final page, 6 of 6, this is under C, under zoning permit approval criteria. The Planning Commission recommended eliminating 2 of those approval criteria that would subject the planning director's discretion to send to a special exception. It's actually recommending that the second one, the proposed use will have a negative aesthetic visual impact, to add that to remain in the ordinance in order for those now have 3 things that would be able to determine whether or not a potential tower would require special exception approval.
So I think that raises the question of whether that's a more substantive provision or not.
Where is that one, John?
Yeah, they considered that though when it went before planning
Yeah.
commission. I think it's adding new stuff that they haven't made a recommendation on, like they considered that and didn't recommend it.
Yeah.
It's subjective.
So for this version, we're keeping it out, keeping it red line through?
So staff is recommending that we provide that back into the ordinance. Right now it's stricken, we would put it back into the ordinance.
So, but Planning Commission specifically considered it and did not want to include it.
So yeah, so I can give you just a little bit of color on that rationale. So the debate became regarding, well, if the town is going to move forward to 150-foot height, all the different impediments that were embedded sort of in the current ordinance should be lifted. And so some of the things regarding, you can see the first one, the proposed use will be detrimental to the adjacent land uses, including historical sites. And the previous section regarding the location height of will not substantially impact the character of property or eligible for natural resources or historic places. The Planning Commission felt that those items were items which burden the ability to move or advance an application to get us to the height necessary for for improved infrastructure. So they really leaned on wanting us to improve infrastructure, and the height is what warranted that ability to do so. And so any of those types of impediments were struck from the proposed code.
I'm just concerned about putting something in that's subjective, that doesn't have criteria around it.
Me too.
So I'm not, at the end of the day, necessarily opposed to what you're suggesting, John, but my recommendation would be, for purposes of what we're going to act on today, that follow the Planning Commission's desires, we can come back as we put together a package of potential further amendments or revisions, whether that we want to give some further thought to incorporating that back in, we could do so at that time.
Okay.
So just to be clear, for me anyway, we're moving forward with keeping these struck through in red.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's good.
Those were the minor things that I thought fall into the minor category. I can just allude to some of the other things, or we can wait until after today to allude to those things.
I think it's going.
Okay.
I think we should go ahead and highlight the issues we had raised and discussed that are more substantive, that everyone should anticipate that we're going to be coming back to council with subsequent amendments at a later date.
One that's already been mentioned, sort of a maintenance reference in the ordinance, being more specific regarding the upkeep of towers that have been constructed. The additional section under.
And by the way, if you can look at some indenture language that we could borrow or something like that, that might be useful.
Under Section 7, retention of expert assistance and reimbursement by the applicant, the goal of much of what you see red line on, and that's page 4 of 6 of there, was to try to simplify the process for reviewing applications. But however, there are some now concerns regarding the cost and the procedural elements of whether or not what's being recommended as a $5,000 limit, not limit, but deposit as the right approach to requiring review, and how does that cost marry into the review requirements, timetable, and any future bonding, et cetera. And so that's one item that's also being recommended to be reviewed sort of in the next stage of this ordinance. Mayor, I'll let you kind of walk more in detail on this next one regarding the approval criteria or approval process. I know there was, our discussion landed on different parts of whether or not administrative approval versus a more scrutinized, whether it be Board of Zoning Appeals or Planning Commission approval for some additional measures of height.
Yeah, there are some things that need to be cleaned up. Just there was some internal consistency, and it's hard to kind of parse what governs. For example, if you go back to 2 of 6 in the stealth tower provision, it says all proposed stealth tower designs must be approved by the planning director, not even any ability to pose any conditions. And it also says a complete zoning permit application for stealth tower meets all the requirements of this article shall be approved. Not clear whether it's really intending to just meet the provisions in A or all of the provisions of the article as a whole. And that language is a little bit consistent with regard to the planning director's authority with regard to kind of the general stealth tower provisions. So there was some, I think we need to take a kind of another fresh look, sharper eyes on, once we've approved this, how whether there's a consistency, internal consistency, and we're exactly right where we want to be with regard to administrative discretion and what needs to come back to what would be either a council approval, planning commission approval, or would be a subject of a variance request to the BZA.
The other thing I wanted, just for clarity and intents purposes, under that approval criteria, the intent of all requirements of the article reference the entire article of this section. So not just under A, but it would reflect the entire entire ordinance under Article 2.
Would it be appropriate, is it a administrative change, just say instead of article, ordinance? Everything in the ordinance shall meet everything in all?
That would address one element of the issue, but there's still some, I think we just need to come back a little bit. I think we're fine to move forward.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's just vote on it, because I
Move
think we're
forward,
okay.
and then this is some cleanup issues that we can do at a subsequent,
Right, yeah,
time.
I think we're on the same page, so let's.
I did want to highlight the last thing that's in your materials, and there's language regarding a drop and swap provision. That language, and I did have a follow-up conversation with Crown Castle, it is really broad, and so being able to narrow that down to specific requests of the applicant, this is following their due diligence of specifically looking at the Ocean Course Tower and drop and swap. So they've already put in some investment of seeing the particular location of where that tower would go. And so because the way the property lines are drawn out on those two parcels, it's really difficult to place it where it would meet all of the standards, setbacks, buffering, even though it's probably in the best ideal location based on the distance away from residential. So that provision of a waiver request was requested to be placed into the ordinance to allow some flexibility for a drop and swap. So we're not talking about a new tower, we're talking about an existing tower that already has zoning approval for that type of use, and it's just being sited in a short distance away from its existing location. But based on that new upgrades of that tower, its new location wouldn't be able to meet, let's just say if it was a 25-foot setback and they requested to adjust that to be able to meet that setback, that's what that waiver requests. So we recognize the ability to try to narrow that. That's one of the changes that that's listed for discussion.
So, Mr. Mayor, that was the kind of the impetus of my original question about the 1.5 plus 50 feet is, if Crown Castle or whomever is going to come in and replace an 80-foot tower with a 150-foot tower at the exact location, are there significant impediments in here for them to do that? And do we want to have those significant impediments, or should that be?
Well, I think the general thrust of this, you've been involved in the conversations with representatives, is to remove, to the extent practicable and reasonable, all those impediments.
Right.
That exist under our current ordinance. Again, as reasonable and practical, without completely eliminating any ability to impose. I mean, there's still ability to pose conditions, address site-specific conditions, et cetera. My concern is with regard to this particular one, is you're suggesting we include new language that's not part of what we approved on first reading.
So correct. I mean, it was not part of first reading, even though it was presented as.
So that's the issue I'm going to ask now is this would be a substantive provision, and we're kind of shying away from
the
substantive provisions. It wouldn't preclude them if we don't add this language at this point in time. It doesn't give them the automatic waiver, but they could still pursue a variance.
Correct.
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 So I'm kind of getting a little guidance to you whether we should, include that.
That one was one of the ones, I think, because of the time.
And can I add before you answer that? It may not change your answer, but we're seeing this, like John said, in particular with the Ocean Course site. The intent, I think, in the long run overall with all the conversation is to avoid consistent and constant BZA variance approvals and requests, that we get this so that it's clean and executable, and there's trust on all parties that we're going to get what we're expecting and they're going to get what they're expecting.
For the existing sites.
For the existing sites. That's where it really comes down to, is that as a practical matter, we're really only talking about existing sites, the roof of the sanctuary and the other 6 sites that are around here. What we're seeing with this site, as John described, is because of the existing equipment, because you can't take down service on the existing tower until the new tower is up and operating, that plays into the siting involved. And so it infringes a little bit on, because of the odd shape of the lot, and this could happen again. And it goes to your concern, as you expressed, Luke, which I agreed with your concern. Navigating this has been interesting to, get equities involved and pick what's the right fight and the right not fight. I think this is one that really should be included, only because we're close to a year in a very collaborative process with the providers, and the funding and investment process is very fickle. And I'm concerned that if we inject a BZA process in on what's a high-demand ocean course tower move, that we'll see the investment go away. And when it goes away, it is extremely difficult to get back. So I do think this one has merit as a near-term issue in getting service improved in the ocean course area.
And I seem to recall the drop and swap language that you're suggesting. Wasn't that did go, I know that at least in some of the materials, whether it was through comments or in the draft ordinance, some of that did go before Planning Commission. They ultimately opted not to include it, though. So I think we're fine to add that change. I mean, what state law requires that it just has to first be submitted to Planning Commission for review and recommendation. So if they saw it but didn't recommend it, y'all can still add that in.
Okay,
Okay, good.
all right. Well, that gives me comfort. Do we actually have the language?
The original planning commission language is in your materials. What's shared is slightly modified from what the planning commission had in their materials, based on the comments of it, the original language being too broad in nature.
This actually protects us better.
Yes.
And this is language that the providers agree they can comply with as well, correct?
I can't comment for Crown Castle. I have not heard back officially from them, but
They've seen it.
they've at least acknowledged that the language that was recommended before was too broad in nature, and they're willing to work with the town to narrow it. So.
And we can include this without sending it back to,
That's the advice that we've received
Okay.
from the town attorney. And where would this go, John?
I would put it at probably at the beginning of where the other elements are, of it, just before the submittal requirements. Before the actual procedure, so before pre-application, creating a new section 5, essentially.
So I'm an engineer and a finance guy, not a lawyer, an English major. What does it mean when it says, which does not implicate the same land use policy considerations as new infrastructure? That second sentence.
Doesn't change any of the law. Well, you asked the attorney.
No, I think that's right, though.
You can tell, so what was it?
I was saying it doesn't change what the existing allowances are for that land use. So as long as they aren't doing something outside of what would be allowed based on the zoning uses for that site.
It's an odd use, it's an odd phrasing, land use policy considerations, which
And
seems
then
to
the
be
last part
broader
is-
than a standard.
And the last piece, as new infrastructure.
That,
I mean, if we put in
I think it could be just tie you back to it being associated with the tower instead of using tower, because now you have the equipment that is associated with the actual tower. So, for example, AT&T, T-Mobile, each of them have boxes or whatnot.
What does the adding that clause, which does not implicate the same land use policy considerations as new infrastructure, add? And what
Yeah.
what would we be missing if we simply deleted that? Because it would still have to meet all the use and zoning and otherwise the requirements of the article, but for relief from the minimum setback and buffer.
I think it could come out and we still have the same intent. I think the only thing that it adds is that it connects it to the existing tower. So because this is a provision specifically for drop and swap, is connecting it to, there has to be an existing tower in order to
Well, but
trigger.
that's
Say
in the
that in the
first
first
sentence.
sentence.
That's in the, that's in,
Which clause is necessary?
yeah.
Can we take that out?
It actually just kind of introduces questions that I'm not sure we necessarily know what those questions are or how to answer them.
Yeah, if we take that out, I'm totally fine with this.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
Any other thoughts on that one?
So do we need an amendment?
So
We
what,
haven't done anything yet, have we?
I would,
I don't think we opened up with a
no, we
motion
have
yet,
not,
so.
we actually never, we probably,
a motion?
this been a discussion
this all over
that's out
again.
of order. So I would entertain a motion for approval of the ordinance on second reading as it was presented to us,
Just now.
as we approved on first reading.
Those are
yeah.
two different.
Any discussion?
Second.
We've, second, any discussion? I would now propose that we're on the underlying ordinance. I would propose a move and amendment to the ordinance that was approved on first reading to reflect the organizational changes that were previously discussed, the addition of the natural grade language, which was being deemed to be non-substantive, and the addition of the drop and swap waiver provision.
As edited, deleting the
Yes.
second sentence, second line.
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion on the amendment?
Just asking council, and we're okay with all of that.
Yes. The thing is, all of this went to planning commission for review and recommendation. The fact that they didn't recommend it, what that statute's designed to prevent is something totally new that they didn't consider. So when you're amending a zoning ordinance and you say it's gonna be residential and y'all, when it comes to all, y'all decide, now we're gonna do conservation. Now you gotta go back to planning commission.
Got it.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
Now we're back on consideration of the ordinance that was approved on first reading as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Councilmember Spencer, for all your hard work on this. Hopefully, we will see the fruits of your collective labor in the relatively near future.
Thank you, Mr. Yates, too, for
Yes, thank you, Mr.
clarification.
Yates.
And our industry partners in the Planning Commission and the Infrastructure and Public Works Committee.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, absolutely. They both of those committees put a lot of work into this. Well done. Thank you all. Now we
Mr.
move,
Yates, I apologize for mentioning American Tower and not mentioning Crown Castle. I apologize.
They're all out there. They're all out there. Thank you all so much.
thank
Hi,
you.
Jonathan.
John's not really going anywhere, and don't know if the chair of the Planning Commission would like to join him at the podium. But the next item on the agenda is the first item of new business, which is consider approval of ordinance 2025-18, which is the town's comprehensive plan, Kiowa Next.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I will give a highlight of the overall plan, some of the big takeaways from the recommended plan by the Planning Commission. Then I allow our Planning Commission Chair, Ms. Hennessy, to come in and sort of add some color of the Planning Commission sort of objectives and their thoughts of going through this particular process to see what you have presented before you. This has been a very involved process to get us to this point, and staff wants to just acknowledge all of those persons that have partaked in this particular process from beginning to end, even though we're not technically at the end yet, but we are getting very close. And so Kiowa Next, as this comprehensive plan is being branded, represents our future. It's advancing the vision for the community, and we're still maintaining the idea that Kiowa is a residential community with an integrated world-class resort. And the structure of the plan has been simplified so that the average resident, average community member whether it be future town council members, whether it be someone visiting for the first time, should be able to pick up this particular document and really understand the goals and objectives of where the town is heading, understand a little bit about the community, and really get a grasp on what is it that the town should be focusing on when it comes to its strategic and future comprehensive planning. This does replace our 2015 comprehensive plan that was also amended in 2019. And so it does incorporate reports, analysis that were done since that time to date. And the things that I'll highlight for you in particular are within the executive summary that are part of the draft that you see in front of you, is that the Planning Commission in getting to this particular point really focused on these three critical factors that shapes the future. One is the success of Kiowa, as we know, really relies on the collaboration of the major Ks that are part of, that make up the structure and DNA of Kiowa. And so that collaborative effort was folded into, we know we have a unique sort of governance structure. And so this is something different that was added to this particular plan than previous plans, which is the addition of an element. So state law requires we have 10 elements, we have 11 with that governance structure. And so that just points and highlights that our need to collaborate with additional stakeholders, the community association, the Gulf Resort, and the many others, as you all are aware of those. And it really puts the town in the leadership position to ensure that the success of Kiowa, if we don't ensure that there's a vehicle that we engage with all those stakeholders, then this plan is ultimately not successful. Two is just managing growth. When we think about the next phase of Kiowa, the next life of Kiowa, we have reached our build-out stage, our primary development stage. In the next cycle, we anticipate that there will be the term build-out, we would have reached that. And so we anticipate entering into a redevelopment stage. So a lot of the commentary that you'll see within the plan points to what does Kiowa need to do from a town standpoint, from a zoning standpoint, to address redevelopment. What do we need to do to ensure that the existing properties and existing neighborhoods are preserved? And then more importantly, as I've referenced several times many years ago, Kiowa points more so beyond the front gates of Kiowa and more interaction with the broader front door, Betsy Caris and Lower Johns Island. And then the last point of this sort of three critical factors is essentially ensuring that Kiowa maintains its commitment to nature. And so what's been branded within the plan is opposed to designing with nature, as we've been designing with nature for a very long time through the inception of Kiowa. Now that our mature community is essentially that we live with nature. And so how does that become materialized through the decisions that we make with stewardship, our best practices, and continuing to essentially lean on those foundational principles of the environment, wildlife, and great stewardship to Kiowa. So I'll pause there and also highlight one more thing is that helps you kind of get a grasp of the actual plan, which is the Kiowa by the number section. So this particular section really just highlights trends, the top impacts that we expect, and so it gives the community a really good snapshot of really quickly what to anticipate with just looking at some of the stats that are associated with the next 10 plus years. That's all connected to what we know as our base foundational element for the plan and our state required elements. And with that, I'll pause and let Ms. Hennessy add the color from the Planning Commission.
Thank you, John. This has been a years-long effort, and I just want to give a shout out. We did a major redo in the past few months with our new Planning Commission. And thank you very much to Stephanie. I can't tell how many hours she put in to helping redo this, as well as John. And I'd like to give a special shout out to our two newest Planning Commission members, Sandy Devine and Mary Beth Schmersel. A good bit of this redirection came from them. We'd never, over the past few years, Luke has worked on this, Madeline has worked on this, we've never been real happy with just the 11 elements, and they help give us a refocus. So the whole beginning part of this plan, which is new in the past few months, was a result of those efforts. We really wanted to focus on conservation. You know, we are at end stage development. So the goals of the plan are to, wherever we can, limit density and increase stress on our infrastructure, and to plan for resiliency for climate change, for stormwater management, for what we need to do in redeveloping to live with nature as it is going to change over the years. So with that, if you have any questions, you know, you all have the plan, so I'm not going to go through anything specific, but if there are, and just also to note, we did get some comments from the community. Are you going to be talking about that?
I was going to address it after.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll let you do that. So if you had any specific questions about what we did in the Planning Commission, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well,
So I just have some general broad, you know, it's not a critique, it's really just, I'm curious kind of thing. On page 12, you talk about a stress test, the emergency.
So the question is, if you just press pause for a second, we do need to go into public hearing. And we can discuss some of this and invite, there will probably be some members of the public who want to comment on this, and maybe some of that will come up in the public hearing. And then rather than questions, if they're kind of comments and we want to have some back and forth, we probably need to move to put the consideration of the Kiowa Next on first reading before us, and then we can have discussion and debate. So if no further questions at this time, I just, as a closing observation, the one person that wasn't mentioned in Chairman Hennessy's litany of all the people who spent a lot of time and effort on this is her own extraordinary leadership in corralling all of this, and her patience in not just dealing with Planning Commission staff and Planning Commission members, but primarily her patience in dealing with my heavy hand in terms of edits and suggestions.
Very
really,
valuable ones, I will add. They were appreciated.
Kudos to you and yeah, particularly Sandy and Mary Beth, but to John and everybody else. It's been a laborious process, much more so than probably should have been the case at the outset, and we had to kind of change directions. But we are where we are, and I think we're better off for all of that as of now. So thank you. And
So
with that,
may I add to that too, please? Because as you know, we worked together for about a year or more on this, and we got to a certain point, but between you and Sandy and the whole team, really, I really appreciate kind of the steps you guys have taken in putting this together. It reflects everything most everything that I think I'd hoped for and things that I desired from a personal standpoint, but you guys have done a very, very nice job in pushing this to the conclusion, so thank you all.
And I'm going to toss in here, because I was involved from the start, and this project's been in utero for about 4 years. It's had a very difficult and painful gestation period, but the end product is really nothing short of terrific. And Joanne, I add my thanks for your leadership on this. This was a tough one. I know that there's been a comment that this is as strategic a document as is a comprehensive plan document, but it's better for that. It's incredibly readable. It should be mandatory reading for anybody who's thinking about buying on Kiowa, because it provides a great understanding of what Kiowa is all about and what direction it needs to be heading in. I appreciate the emphasis on resiliency, and think the timing of the creation of the Resiliency Committee, along with your focus on all sorts of resiliency efforts, is critical and timely. So just kudos on a job that was very, very well done. Painful, but worth it.
And I'm going to say this one last time, and I can't let it go. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you calling out the 11 elements on a page. You know, that was one of my passions all the way through this. The fact that I know now how this works, I'm really impressed. So thank you both. Thank you all.
and with that, I would entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Just for the record, I just wanted to make sure that as we're entering public hearing, that the comments that were received are entered into the record for consideration too.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're now in public hearing. Yes, the comments that were received, Madam Clerk, would you please make sure those are part of the public hearing record? Are there any members of the public that would like to comment at this time? I see at least one who's provided written comments. I don't know if said individual wants to make any comments this time. They're not in the obligation to do so.
I don't know if you're speaking to someone else.
You said at least one, so you're safe.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, and those in attendance, there is incredibly little I can add to all the comments that have been made about how excellent this document is. This is by far the best document of its kind since the town incorporated. It was a meaningful, I understand it was painful, but it was well worth the effort. This borrowed from a way of thinking that starts first with how can we collaborate as a community in terms of finding resources, finding information, and finding a path forward. And although that word was not necessarily embedded in here, it's in every part of this in terms of how we as a community can become a better community, having started for the first 50 years at a pretty reasonable level. We can become a better community. The two initiatives that I want to highlight, in addition to the comments that I provided, which I don't need to go through because there were little recommendations for consideration of things. But the two initiatives that I would like to reinforce is the establishing the Kiowa Island Alliance and the Redevelopment Task Force. There was a little bit of a start of the alliance idea a couple of years ago, I want to say 10 or 15 years ago. But I think in both circumstances, these would be great platforms for ways of thinking to not only address problems, but opportunities in terms of how our community could become better. The only two recommendations that I would like to, in fact, call out is a suggestion that we add into a specific element of this, which I had in my notes, of updating the land use regulations using this way of thinking of comprehensive planning, apply that to updating Article 12. It would be well worth the effort of the community to platform the comp plan as a model for how to reconsider that. It's woefully beyond the time to do that. The other area is, I think we could be a little bit more clear in the document to address the differential between possible and probable unit counts. That's my way of talking about it. There are many other ways. There were several call-outs that were clear attempts by the committee to suggest what the upper range might be. But the complicating factor is not all remaining undeveloped lands are residential only. If they're residential only, you could be real clear on the upper-lower range. But the two most significant undeveloped areas yet to be considered also allow for non-residential uses. So I would suggest refining those areas, just building upon what's presented in the document about what's possible and probable on the unit count, or at least as a minimum, develop a framework for, well, it could be this number of hotel rooms and then correspondingly what the residential count would be, or if the condition is no hotel rooms, here's what the residential count could be. I mean, it's a differential there. I too want to have a special call out to the Planning Commission members and the staff, and in particular, Joanne, Sandy, and Mary Beth, as well as the professional staff. Despite the best efforts of previous planning commissions to move this forward, it did not happen until the past 3 months in terms of getting to a much higher level. And those people are singularly responsible for that. And as a property owner, I appreciate that very much. This is a well-organized and informative document. Whether you're a long-term property owner or you might be considering coming here as a visitor or a possible property owner, you can pick up this document if within a short period of time, have a better understanding of our community, more so than any other document that has been prepared by any other institution. So good work.
Thank you, Mr. Permar, for those comments. Any other members of the community to offer comments during public hearing? I just want to respond to a couple of points, and we can get into this in the substantive discussion raised by Mr. Permar. He and I chatted about this a little as well.
Sorry, Mayor Belt, are we still in public?
We are in public
Mayor?
hearing. I'm kind of just responding to the comment raised by a member of the public during public hearing, which is there need to be some tweaks, both to kind of make sure, massage the numbers a little bit, but also how we characterize those numbers. I completely agree with you. And I've perhaps been overly focused on all of this, not just for the sake of some kind of artificial precision around the numbers, but to really help people better understand where we are and where we are likely to be, where we have the potential to be, but what does that mean? And what really drives home the point for me is that people say, already our infrastructure is stretched, already our amenities are stressed. And that's with the level of dwelling units we have as of this current day, not the ones that are under construction, but the ones we have today, the number of employees that we have today, the number of hotel rooms we have on the island today, the number of short-term rentals properties we have on the island today. So I think we need to recognize as a community kind of every additional one of those things is going to add incremental pressure to our roads infrastructure and our amenities infrastructure. So part of what this document does is how do we start thinking about how best to respond to that. But we really need to understand that, think about the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. The only thing that's really changed, other than maybe, and this is more anecdotal, no hard evidence, is that people are spending part-time property owners are spending more time in the owners, and I've got the number somewhere, we've added something like 300 front doors, dwelling units that have got certificate of occupancy over the last 4 or 5 years. But that's it. No increase in short-term rentals, no increase in hotel rooms, no increase in employment. So we've experienced greater congestion, greater delays just because of a less than 10% increase in the number of dwelling units. Think about then, on top of that, if we're adding new hotel properties, if we're adding new short-term rental properties, if we're adding as much as 20% more in the way of dwelling units, what are the implications of that for those same infrastructure issues that we're already facing? So I agree, we've got to help people really understand what these numbers are and what they mean and put them in appropriate context. But you're absolutely right. It's to say that we're probable going to end up with 5,200 is that's not practical or realistic. So I don't know if you want to, yeah.
I would agree with everything you just said. The only thing I would suggest is when we more fully evaluate our near-term as well as far-term future, we're also subject to an aging building base. And a lot of the traffic isn't necessarily attributed, some of it is, but a lot of the traffic is attributed to renovation work, service work by properties that have been in business relative to livability for a lot of decades. So I'm building upon what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing. I'm building upon what you're saying in terms of characterizing every movement through that front gate, which is our closest expression of increase, right? Is going through that front gate. Doing a complete assessment of who goes through that front gate and where are they going would be a really healthy thing.
That's where critically, more so than anything else, understanding that is where you have to have collaboration amongst all the stakeholders. So, thank you, Mark. No other comments from members of the public, then I entertain a motion to return to regular order. And first reading of, all in favor?
Aye.
I would entertain a motion for approval on first reading of ordinance 2025-18, the town's comprehensive plan.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Questions, comments, discussion.
I'm going to finish my general question I had. And it's only because I don't know how you do it, which is why I'm asking it. So on page 12, there's just a reference to performing a stress test of the transportation infrastructure capacity under normal conditions and emergency I'm just curious, how do you do that? I just...
He can evacuate the island and...
No, I just... I mean, how do you do that?
I saw that too.
Yeah, I don't know.
So it's really data driven. A lot of what a stress test that can be done at that scale, right? Just using existing data of what we know. So right now we currently track our parkway annually, and we try to keep track of those numbers. When we think about from an emergency standpoint, first I want to make the point with this is not just referring to roads, but for all infrastructure. But continuing, it requires that we have the accurate data in collaboration with the providers. So Kiawah Island Utility, Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, not too long ago in the cell tower work, we actually met with them independently to really understand the capacity levels, right? So you have a base case scenario, and then you're essentially adding a growth factor to that base case scenario of this would be the extreme in an emergency situation.
Well, but when I think of a stress test, I think of you apply an external controlling event to normal operating procedures and see where it falls down, where it breaks down. And that's where I was thinking of, a stress test. So I was thinking that you have normal traffic and then you do a make-believe traffic accident or something. But the use of the term stress test, I'm saying, if with respect to traffic, are you going to throw an obstacle in the middle? I mean, what is the stress test comprised of for the road? I mean, that's where I was just curious from.
Yeah, I think there's some discussion to be had and the different strategies or methods to going that route. The comp plan won't necessarily give us the exact direction to do that, but I think there's data points that you can use and models that you can use. So when we reached out to our consultants with Kimley Horn to understand what the potential implications of additional development. Well, we know that traffic particularly comes from additional trips, whether or not from a incident of the parkway being closed off because there was an accident. It's really hard to measure that other than the data points using of how long someone might have sat in traffic until that obstacle was moved.
Well, we have seen, at least I have, enough times this year where there is an accident and there's miles and miles of backup on the parkway.
The traffic circle doesn't function anymore.
Yeah. So I mean, but to your point, calling it out in the plan allows us to at least begin the conversations to say we need to begin to prepare for the worst case scenario.
Well, and that kind of, if I could jump in, that case in point is kind of my broader question is, I love plans, written and implemented a lot of plans over the years. I think Major Pro Tem Berner's question is good because I think about like at a military base, which we're not a military base, but you annually practice a major aircraft response exercise, and you anticipate that an aircraft's gone down, and the whole base generates around it. You can't do that in a community like this, but that's kind of a stress test.
It is, yeah, it's a stress test.
Of how do you, and so I look at the recommendations in here, which are good, But how do we put them into action? Because there's a lot of resources I think they'll be involved in executing this plan if we execute it as envisioned.
And I would add to that, to Mr. Berner's point, what we do in our emergency management tabletop exercises, right? You have a scenario and where resources are deployed, that comes into the same sort of framework of preparing for those types of emergency situations. You might not know the exact answer, but the structure and the procedures that are in place to address that issue is what I think, from a resiliency standpoint, that is really critically important.
Yeah, if I can too, from my history, and Joanne, correct me if I'm wrong, is the way this was thought about at the time was we need to pose the questions, not have the solution. So we need to stress test. We need to know how do we evacuate I was thinking about this tonight. How do you evacuate the island if you need to do it quickly? You need to shut down the incoming lane and do that. Okay, but that requires some markers. You got to have police cars. You got to have cones, all that stuff.
So
This is not to supply that answer. It's to supply the question. You need to do this. What do you need to do?
I just think it's going
So-
to be on us, though. Well, we'll approve this. It'll be on the mayor and the staff and us to do approvals along the way. That the follow-through actions of the swing, there's budget considerations, there's staffing considerations, there's hosting QNX. And I'm not critiquing anything. These are all great recommendations, but putting them in motion, if we do as intended, is going to drive a lot of things.
So that's the one subtle thing that's different about this one than the previous comp plans, is the old comp plans, the questions that were posed, there would be a responsible party and a time frame to come up with an answer. I don't think we're not doing that in this one this time, but that's what we need to do anyway, is we need to, maybe as a council or the council and planning commission, say, okay, we've laid out these broad vision and the goals, okay, and what's the action items we need to do, and who's going to be responsible for those action items?
This looks like a
That's
planning
the-
offsite.
This doesn't answer that? That's the next step, I think. Is that
Yeah,
right?
we had talked about, and, again, we just really redid this in the past few months. If we had started this years ago, we would have had in there responsible party and a recommended time frame. That can come. For things, some of the stress test things, like for the Kiowa Island utility, the water people, they do that, and we've talked to them about it, and I'm comfortable they're really on top of it. Also, Berkeley Electric, what are some of the stress things? The road things are things that the town is going to have to become more involved with. But these are things we have to think about. So I think, if you're focusing on the roads, yes, that is something that the town is going to be responsible for. As far as things like water and electricity, we will rely on the suppliers for that and work with them, but there are a lot of competent people there, and they are doing their stress tests and their maximum capacity issues.
Some of these issues, just like that one, you say it's on the town, but references leisure trails and use of the leisure trails as potential emergency that is one of those things that would have to be worked out in collaboration with KICA and probably the golf courses, KIGR and maybe even KIC as well. Town doesn't have the unilateral ability to say, let's drive along the leisure trails with a bunch of cars to see if that's a potential solution for getting around. Let's say Kiowa Island Parkway for flooding or major accident or something is completely closed off, and people have to get off the island for one reason or another. What are all the alternative paths? But that's something that does require.
I'll give you another one too. So what if Kiowa Island Parkway on island is shut down, let's say at Sea Forest or right in there? There's a potential to open up Eugenia through the Sandcastle parking lot to get out that way. There's also the potential to open up where the Cape Circle is to then come down Beachwalk Arrive and exit the island that way. So those are the things that is the next step after this is now put in place.
I'm just wanting to be eyes wide open that there's a next step, and we need to decide how we're going to take that next step.
I don't know if that's infrastructure and public works, if that's public safety.
I heard it was public
or
safety,
it's just
but-
wait part of the Kiowa Island Alliance, agenda item. Oh, okay. Other questions or comments?
Maybe kind of based on Joanne's comments and with these questions, maybe the next step is to start to parse through this after it's approved and put it back on the planning commission to tell us what are the action items and who should be responsible, what's the time frame we should do this.
It might be a strategic offsite kind of thing.
Part of that next step too is incorporating typically our annual goals of our town council planning retreat annually to focus in on exactly what are the main priority points, and we can fold it into that as well.
So, but procedurally, because, I'm, there still needs to be some massaging numbers, tweaks, some editorial issues that need to be addressed or cleaned up. There may be substantive recommendations. For example, earlier today, and also in Ways and Means, you mentioned, one of the recommendations is to establish a redevelopment task force. Would we want to embed the idea of a land bank task force or something in the strategic plan? We wouldn't have to. We could do that separately, but was council's inclination to embed that in something like that in the strategic plan? That raises the question procedurally. Again, if we approve this on first reading, between now and second reading, to what extent does the council, ultimately council, this is a recommendation from the planning commission, again, like ever planning commission recommendations to council, the council's going to adopt this, council has the ability to amend it. What are the instances in which we would need to send this back if at all, if we're making any substantive changes? For example, if that one had never been considered by the planning commission.
I'm only jumping in because the idea of an actual organization responsible for that task probably has not, but the idea of considering the town being, use the word aggressive, in acquiring land is embedding in there.
A
so,
specific task force is not, but you're right, that is. But, let's say it wasn't in there at all. Is this the same type of thing, that something coming from the planning commission, if we're making substantive changes, does it have to go back or not? Okay. And while you're looking that up, just a general observation, again, kind of kudos to the Planning Commission. One of the, I don't know if they had the same frustration that I did from the kind of beginning, the being a little just outside the center circle of this, is trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, because the state statute requires that you address these 10 elements. In all fairness, not each and every one of these elements is that applicable to Kiowa Island, as is the case with most traditional municipalities. For example, economic development related issues and things like that. So, it's been a little bit of a challenge just trying to make sure, okay, what do we want to say in a thoughtful way about these things we have to talk about?
Well, that's why we added the whole front section. Yeah. The back, the elements are required by the state to be addressed. We address them. But we wanted to show what's more Kiowa specific, because we are unique. In the outline of the state elements, they talk about things, schools and libraries and a lot of stuff that aren't relevant to Kiowa Island. But we were still required to have all of those sections. So we have all the sections. A lot of them were just lightly modified from the 2015 plan. But the beginning section is all new, and that's all Kiowa. So yes, we had the square peg in the round hole.
And there's no requirement by the state in how much depth you have to place on each one of the elements. You just have to address each one of the elements. And ours, as you can well imagine, ours are very different because of, you can think of the differences between Charleston and how they might have a strategic plan or a comp plan and their issues versus us. And the big thing for us was, let me say this correctly, we're not overly encouraging development and redevelopment where Charleston is, and we weren't overly changing land use patterns for specific purposes where Charleston actually is. So we met the legal requirement, but it's very different, and it's tailored to our needs in great part.
Another kind of broader observation about this effort is what Joanne just alluded to, is the focus on kind of the strategic elements going forward. Because we really need to focus on both where do we want to go, and then what are the pressures that are driving us in a particular direction or not, and how do we best respond to those? And that's going to be a signal challenge. I do have a little bit of a kind of a ongoing concern, and it came up in the KICA board meeting yesterday, is absolutely to solve a lot of issues, we have to collaborate. I want to be careful when I say this, but there also needs to be continued better clarity amongst all the institutions as to actual roles and responsibilities, legal and practical. And, you know, it's a minor issue, but it kind of came up in the context of gate access policy and a recent KICA communication that went out that said something to the effect that e-bikes are not allowed on Kiowa Island. That's not true. And then he said, well, we're just kind of referring to that generically. Well, but that's part of the problem. It causes confusion about who is responsible for what are the actual rules of the road, and the distinctions between the town of Kiowa Island and the island itself as a geographic thing, and then a subset of that is the common properties owned and maintained by the community association, as well as the properties of our other significant stakeholders. And these are going to continue to present some occasionally vexing. Sometimes the lines are clear, sometimes they're fairly blurred. I don't think there's always an appreciation, as there needs to be, for the hierarchy in the community. You know, federal law, state law, local law, then restrictive covenants. And there's not an equivalency amongst all of those. There's that clear hierarchy to all of those, and I think sometimes that's lost sight of. But again, even where there is clarity around those issues, then there's still need for addressing, you know, collaborating to achieve a desired outcome. So that's going to be part of a continuing dialogue amongst all the stakeholders, but it's one that I've been trying to, whether it's with regard to the company / ARB or KICA and all, just be a little bit more precise about how we talk about some of these things. Anyway, I've said enough.
So, Mr. Mayor, how do you want to proceed with this?
So my recommendation would be to, at this juncture, simply approve this on first reading, recognize the extraordinary good and hard work of the Planning Commission, invite council members to, you know, if there are any both, you know, editorial changes or substantive changes that would like to raise, we can certainly provide those to John, Stephanie, and me, and then we can look to try to pull all those together for potential changes prior in contemplation of changes for second reading. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That work for everybody?
Certainly can do that under the statute. This is under a different article of the Planning Act and has its own separate procedures for adoption, and it requires first to start at the Planning Commission, public hearing, and then first and second reading. So you certainly can amend this one.
Okay.
The provision I'm talking about relates to text and zoning map amendments.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. There may be some things before we go to second reading that we may want to get additional input from the Planning Commission on, either clarification as to what they intended or how they thought about this being, you know, operating in practice or not, and we can make our own decisions and judgments around that.
So, since this is so substantial, may I recommend to you, sir, that we have a deadline for submitting changes, comments, questions to you, so everyone has time to respond to the changes, comments, questions, and then we'll be ready at the next meeting? Is that?
Can I suggest 2 weeks?
Perfect.
For that? Okay. Any further discussion, questions, or comments? John, Stephanie, Mac? If not, I would entertain a motion. I mean, we've already, any further discussion? If not, all in favor of approving the comprehensive plan on first reading?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Joanne. The next agenda item, John, you're still up, and Joanne, I don't know if you want, she's dashing out the door.
Right back.
Okay. Whether there's stuff that you may want to, she may want to touch upon with regard to this, but John, this is ordinance 2025-19. Could you provide background and context for this?
Yes, ordinance 2025-19 begins to assess our several base zoning districts.
This is another recommendation from the Planning Commission.
Correct. This is a recommendation from the Planning Commission from the August 6th Planning Commission meeting. Subsequent to this, or I'm not going to say subsequent, but through the evaluation of the comprehensive plan process, looking at specific zoning districts, one of the objectives was to address density and looking at specifically lot coverage, height, and setbacks. And so specifically, there are several zoning districts within the categories of residential, resort, community support, parks and recreation, zoning districts that standards have been recommending change. You'll see under the RST1 and RST2, those specific red lines. And then under the rest of the zoning districts that are listed, those also include reductions in overall lot coverage. And so I'll go through each of the sections independently so you identify what those changes are. The first being under section 12-67, which is our R3 residential zoning district. The changes that are being recommended from the Planning Commission there to adjust the maximum lot coverage percentage. And this is specifically for two of the categories being multifamily and townhomes. That reduction, the existing coverage is 60%. That reduction is being requested to go to 40%, respectively, for both of those townhouses and multifamily categories. Under the commercial zoning district, there was a recommendation to reduce that. Originally, the Planning Commission did falter back to the existing 70% for commercial designations. So there's no changes under section 12-68 that are being recommended by the Planning Commission. Under section 12-69, our Resort 1 category, I'll begin with the maximum lot coverage. Maximum lot coverage for this particular section is 70%. The recommendation of the Planning Commission is to reduce that to 50%. Additionally, within this particular zoning district, you'll see the modifications to our maximum height and minimum setback requirements. These now introduce a tiered system regarding based on the height of the building corresponding to what the respective setback would be. And so currently there is a 4-story, 70 feet height maximum that is being reduced to a 4-story, 55 feet height maximum, and corresponding lowering as it goes towards the ocean. There's been an identified oceanfront and non-oceanfront setback introduced, so you can see that respective change where the oceanfront setbacks, the taller the building, the further it needs to be set back away from the ocean. The additional change in this particular section addresses footnote number 6, which is being requested to be eliminated, that and footnote 1. These are two things that are required by our code. And so to make clarity, footnote 1, where it says smaller non-residential lots may be permitted by town council as part of a plan development, just pursuant to our plan development section 159. That's already embedded in code, so it's kind of a duplication that's just being requested to be stricken there. And regarding section footnote 6, height in the RST1 zoning district, this applies to hotels and associated activities. Eliminating that just would make it consistent that no matter what development is in that zoning district, the height applies. Moving to section 12-1270, RST2. One of the things I wanted to highlight before I move on, RST1 versus RST2, the differences, just to identify, all of these are essentially respective to specific areas on the island. The RST1 zoning district is the footprint of where the existing sanctuary is located. RST in East Beach area, RST2 is West Beach, the conference center, the old Inn site, that area of the island.
John, is there a map in here that shows those districts?
There is not a map inside your materials. We can provide, there's one, but I can pull one up for you while we discuss this.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
I can just make a comment that the Planning Commission did this to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and the goals of the community to, wherever we can, reduce density and protect the environment. So that was a lot of the impetus behind this. It was environmental and it was density. And this follows with the thinking that went into Kiowa Next.
I have the zoning map pulled up here. The pink color that you see listed in the center there, that's the RST1 zoning district. So where the sanctuary is currently located, that's the and parcel just east, the East Beach also, which is under the Portfolio Resort. Those areas there, that's the RST1. And if you go back further west, to see West Beach, the current site, this sort of darker purple color, those sites are the RST2 zoning district categories. That.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's helpful, thanks.
Okay. Continuing on the particular standards under the 12-70 RST2 zoning district, what's being recommended here is under the maximum lot coverage, the existing coverage allowance is 70%. That recommendation is being requested to be lowered to 50%. The maximum height in stories is 4 stories, 55 feet. That 4 stories, 55 feet is being requested to be eliminated. So the maximum height for this category would be 3 stories, 55 feet in height. And then there's a corresponding oceanfront reduction or increase in setbacks on the ocean. So that now, based on 120 feet in height, that corresponds to the 3 stories. As it's being lowered 2 stories, it responds to a 100-foot setback and continues to be lowered down towards the ocean. Similarly, in the previous ordinance, previous section, RC1, we're eliminating a recommendation to eliminate sub-footnote 6, which corresponds to the height being associated with that particular zoning district. And footnote number 10, which reads, with respect to a parcel under development agreement comprised of more than one tax map parcel, the maximum number of rooms shall not be determined based on individual tax map basis, but instead on the acreage. So this is just knowing that if a development agreement is in place, that it would correspond to that, and so that language is just eliminated, not necessarily placed into the RST2 category.
John, on page 8 of 16, that oceanfront setback, it's 120 or 100 or 60 or 40 feet from what?
The property line.
Property line. Thank you.
There will be forthcoming, I believe, from the Planning Commission. In fact, I think you're taking it up tomorrow, a beachfront overlay, which will have setbacks measured from the jurisdictional line.
Okay, thank you.
Right, yeah, so that'll be something the planning commission discusses on tomorrow. The community support zoning districts, there are no changes being recommended to those two zoning categories. And then under Parks and Recreation, section 12-72, you see the existing maximum lot coverage is 70%. That reduction is being requested to go to 60%, a reduction of 10% there. And similarly on section 12-72.1, which is the Parks and Recreation Zoning District Ocean Course. And just for orientation purposes, the Parks and Recreation Zoning District is one of our most popular on the island. It's where all of our golf courses are centered and most of our recreation facilities. So the Kiawah Island Community Association, Sandcastle falls under that zoning category. Our golf courses, the East Beach Conference Center, Night Heron Park, those are Parks and Recreation. I say Conference Center, not Conference Center, East Beach Club, Night Heron Park as well. And then regarding the Ocean Course Parks and Rec Zoning District, you may be aware that adjacent to the Ocean Course Clubhouse, recently there were cottages sited, and so that sort of teal color responds to the Parks and Recreation Ocean Course District, which incorporates limited residential use as part of the Parks and Recreation zoning designation. That concludes all of the recommendation changes for the Planning Commission. I do want to highlight, which was incorporated into your materials, the same comments that were provided to the Planning Commission, Mr. Kumar, as submitted written comments. And if there are any questions on this is also a public hearing, so we need to enter a public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I move we go into public hearing.
Just one moment, please, sir. Yes.
Move we go into public hearing.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Comments from members of the public?
And John, while Mark's coming up, can you send this map to us via email or something, please? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, and members of council, and members in the audience, my name is Mark Permar. I'm here representing not only my role as a property owner on Kiawah, but also with KIGR and Kiawah Partners. Unlike the previous session, I'm not as bullish about this, but what I'd like to do is share with you where I'm coming from. But first, I want to say I believe strongly that the Planning Commission is well-intended in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. So it has nothing to do with the nature of that point of view. It's where are we in assessing the future standards of the island. I think the time has come that we need to revisit in its entirety Chapter 12 as a whole. We are many years after the embracing of the original town of Kiawah Island adopting previous standards that were authored by others. And over time, those were adjusted, and many times those adjustments were appropriate for our community. Not unlike what we talked about during the comprehensive plan area, we are a different community than the standard primary home community that occupies most of the world. Chapter 12 originally was based upon that world, not the world that we have evolved to be, which is largely a second home community that has active recreation and resort activities. Our conditions are different than a primary home community. The standards that exist, the framework, which is trying to constantly being adjusted, is the other world. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves and reflect on that. Before, I was going to go through all my comments, but I'm just going to go rogue here or even for me. Before I came here, about 30 minutes before I left, I determined that there are 607 days before the termination of the existing development agreement with the resort. That's a long period of time in which we as a community can take the same approach that was championed by the Planning Commission on the comp plan to revisit Chapter 12 or other related chapters within the ordinance, and not just revise those in a piecemeal way, which we've been doing over multiple years through map amendments and through text amendments, but give it an honest effort, like what Joanne and her team did with the comp plan, to revisit what is unique about our community and assess it. Now, there's an old school part of me that, well, let me start new school first. I think we should learn from others how they have adapted their similar community type over time. But I think we ought to also do old school homework from a planning perspective of getting out and seeing the same place differently. So I listed here that we should get to know our community that we think we know so well, but see it in a different light. Twice a year, I drive the entire island. It takes about 2.5 to 3 hours, depending upon where I pause and take a look at it to see the same place. Now, it's been a long time since I biked the entire trail system, but the 30 miles can be accomplished in 3 hours. So driving, 2.5 to 3 hours, biking, three hours, or walk the beach from west to east in the similar pattern that the island evolved. The 10 miles, normal pace is 3 hours. And in addition to that, review all building permits and BZA applications within the past 5 years. What I'm trying to do is suggest to see the island in a different way. See, we're all in muscle memory of how we see the island and how we consider it. And that's okay, but that's an impediment to us of reflecting on assessing a better way of thinking, well, what the standards should be. So I'm strongly urging that to be considered. Now, with my KRGR hat on, even though we are presently within the zone of the standards of the development agreement prevail. So if you were to consider changes in the RST1 and the RST2, that's interesting, but those don't go into effect until the development agreement expires. But I want to share with you why the proposed standards are not in sync with the plans for both of those holdings. Both of those, as was pointed out by John, aren't just general residential districts that could be applied anywhere. They're very site-specific. They're almost like a planned development district zoning classification for the RST1 East Beach or RST2 West Beach. The proposal would result in the sanctuary hotel, as was mentioned in the staff report, becoming non-conforming. West Beach is the same way in terms of filling the last remaining piece of the puzzle of the phases that have been expended. The resort has expended hundreds of millions of dollars, in excess of $200 million, in combination of both of those, in anticipation of what the provisions of the development agreement are. So, for example, the Sanctuary Hotel was designed, the public spaces, the conference facility, the food and beverage, anything, the back of the house is all designed for an anticipated additional wing of up to 175 rooms at the 40 rooms per acre that is in the development agreement. The standards proposed here are, I think, 8 rooms per acre. It's completely out of sync with what the commitment of the improvements that have been done there. The same is true in West Beach, where the improvements of the conference facility, the villa check-in, the clubhouse are all sized in anticipation of, hopefully for all of us, I'm there with all of you, a completion of whatever the new hotel might be in that location. 9 rooms per acre there doesn't make sense with the allowance for up to 150 rooms, which was the original inn, for those of you that remember the Kiowa Inn at that time. My point being is, I think now is the time not to incrementally adjust through text amendments or map amendments the existing Chapter 12. Now is the time for us to get on with it and really to look at it in full form, exactly like the comp plan process was revealed. It was longer, it took longer, but look what happened. We have a more meaningful comp plan. We can have a more meaningful Chapter 12 or related development district, or zoning classifications. Thank you.
Can I ask Mark a question?
Certainly.
I just have one question of the entire thing, and it has to do with the letter you wrote that's included as an attachment in this tab of the book. And I just want to understand where you're coming from and why it may or may not be a big deal. The purpose of all this is to reduce density, so I understand that. But you say, quote, the proposed maximum lot coverage reduction from 70 to 50% is inconsistent with high-end resort development standards. Is that going to have an impact on quality? Is that just merely lowering density? What are you trying to say?
The idea is, and it was accentuated with the original planned development district approved 50 years ago this year, was to select specific geographic areas that, after an exhaustive site assessment of the entire island, were the most tolerant of intense development. There were 3 villages: West Beach, East Beach, and a river village. We walked away from the river village. We thought it was less appropriate out there as time evolved. But the 2 West and East Beach villages were purposefully selected for intense development. The standards that are included in here, that ground coverage standard, is an example of that. Those are areas that are suitable for additional clearing in terms of allowing for, by Kiowa standards, intense development. So that's why I commented that it's going the opposite way. It's starting to lower intense. I understand where it's coming from, which is every tree that's lost is a lost tree. But the idea was choices were made on the 4,500 acres as a whole of being less dense in certain areas and more dense in concentrated areas.
Well, I got it. So I think in rephrasing what you just said, because I didn't understand that when I read it, which is why I asked the question. So it's really because you're saying that doesn't provide the village.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
That
Another example, if I could, would be, and this is more abstract, okay? In the R3 category, there is a condition that allows for no more than 4 units in a building. But it allows for 12 units per acre. It allows for dense. So it pushes it, the moment you reach 4, you got to, and you want to reach certain density levels, you add another building footprint, as opposed to if it were to allow for 8 units in a building, you reduce the amount of ground coverage that's removed as a result.
I understand, but the concept, this reduction would eliminate to some extent, the village that you were.
But Mark,
that's what I was looking for.
Exactly to that point, I think wherein lies the rub, because what you just said, it kind of forces you to build more buildings. Not if there's also a reduction in maximum lot coverage, for example. I think, and here's I think where the real challenge is. What seems to be the direction the Planning Commission is signaling is, given where we are today and where we want to go forward, we can be informed by what occurred in the past or what plans were made 50 years ago, but that's not where we are today. That we recognizing ownership rights and development rights, but directionally, we want lower building heights, less density, fewer dwelling units, more open space. And I think the challenge is the fact that 50 years ago, somebody thought it made sense to have a whole bunch of density in West Beach. I'm not sure what relevance that has to us today, given our circumstances that we're aware of today. And the challenge was the development agreements that were entered into. It's a quid pro quo, but they tie the hands of a council, they tie the hands of a planning commission for 10 years, or at least these agreements did, and because of amendments, whether or not those amendments were effective or not, even longer than 10 years, to a set of conditions that no longer exist and eliminate the ability of the body politic and the community to respond to those changes. And, I completely support the idea of a more comprehensive rewrite of Chapter 12. Couldn't agree more. Chapter 12 is basically just adopted from Charleston County, which bears very little relevance, as you note, to our community, here. But in the interim, we'll get there. John has wanted to do that. We want to do that. But in the interim, I fully support what I think the Planning Commission is trying to do is, until we have that opportunity, let's systematically, which I believe they're doing, is systematically going through Chapter 12 as it exists today and trying to say, where are the changes, regardless of whether they were entered into a development agreement or whether they were agreed by the master developer or whomever, 50, 25, even 10 or 15 years ago. That's not where we are today. Those decisions were all made by a handful of people, and they weren't the community. It wasn't the elected officials that were making those decisions way back when. It was the developers and the master development plan. And again, informed by that, I would stipulate, did extraordinarily wonderful job, because we're all benefit from your work, going back and listening to your hour or 2 hour, 3 hour long podcast, I can't remember what it was, the vision was extraordinary. But even the most wise people with the greatest clarity of vision can't anticipate everything that will play out over the course of a 50-year period. So I think what this entire community is trying to do is react to where we are now, and when we're no longer constrained by agreements that were entered into that were, in a sense, thrust upon us as policymakers more than a decade ago, to say, okay, that was then, and that was their vision. That's not where the community is now. That's not the direction we want to go. And I think that's the tension.
I understand it. My simple response is that there were people sitting in your position that felt they were doing well to the community when they did. There was a public process, and it yielded what it yielded. Mm-hmm. And, oh, by the way, it resulted in significant improvements to our community that our property owners have access to. And so my only point, I understand what you're saying, that today is today. We learn more, we know more. I'm supportive of revisiting a lot of decisions, mostly in Chapter 12, because it's not, quite frankly, it's less about the developer and it's more about all of us individual property owners.
So let me ask you this question. If you want to wait until we do a comprehensive rewrite of Chapter 12, are your clients willing to put a moratorium on any development activity until we do all of that?
No. Is this a trick question? I am simply, here's where I'm mostly coming from, without going point by point in the existing ordinance, is you reach a point where you can't edit bad writing. the existing ordinance is bad writing. And I believe the Planning Commission is honestly, in their action, trying to get to a better, I totally agree with that. It's not adversarial. But what I'm saying is we are beyond the time of going ahead and doing it the right way. And we have time to do it before, the biggest changes, quite frankly, are in the RST districts. Well, they don't apply to, you might make changes, but they don't apply today for almost 2 years. So let's use the time as a community to get it right. Additionally, I think we have to reflect that, by way of example, the R3 district has no application to what's out there in R3 districts right now. We finalized one aspect, which is the ground coverage. That has sealed the fate that almost every multifamily project built over many decades is non-conforming. We don't want that. It does. So the opportunity is for us to reflect on that by doing our homework as a group in a collaborative way, recognizing those with appropriate zoning classifications and inventing new zoning classifications for the areas that are of particular concern to you, which are the undeveloped areas.
My personal view, I can't speak for my fellow council members, I listen to a lot of planning commission members, is hear you all and all of that, but we're going to dual track. We can talk about that conceptual perfection in a zoning code and create new zoning districts in the fullness of time. But in the interim, because there's still development activity ongoing, we want to be able to put some additional kind of constraints and parameters around that weren't previously there, recognizing the changed circumstances over the last 10 or 15 years. And I think, and the fact that I know, I've heard this from John and Stephanie, the idea of kind of nonconformities seems to be raise hackles. It's very intentional. It's very intentional. You can still build back exactly what you have, but you can't expand that use, and it would be a non-conforming structure. And that is in a very intentional, I believe, act on the part of the Planning Commission to make sure that if you're going to blow up, whether it's a single-family residence, multifamily residence, or something else, you're going to be constrained by now the new standards going forward. And but again, communities all over the world have nonconformities. They build in nonconformities.
Nowhere to the extent that we have. Nowhere. I'm relatively familiar with like-kind communities. There is nowhere that case. And if you want to look at what happens, because we're on the front line of natural disaster world, God forbid if we ever have something like what's happened to Florida. But if you go to Florida now and look at the issues related to non-conforming structures, I would think you would reflect on those. But I'll be honest with you, I'm beyond being hung up on non-conforming. R3 doesn't matter to me anymore. It doesn't reflect who we are. And there are aspects of other zoning classifications that aren't. The targeting of RST1 and RST2 is site-specific to an existing owner. And I'm suggesting that let's use the time while the existing standards apply, let's use the time to update an ordinance that's long overdue. And I sense that we all agree to that. It's worth it.
Well, I think what you just said was the RST1 and RST2, it's moot for the next 2 years. So what I'm hearing you say is doesn't really matter. So we can do this because it doesn't really matter according to your words, and we can set a course to rewrite the whole ordinance.
And if you get to 607 days from now, and you haven't kind of moved forward with regard to your legal entitlements now under the development agreement, then the base zoning would be what's
totally
in front of us now.
I totally get it. That's when I transitioned to reflection on, let's take the RST1. That building was designed with the intent of adding at least one wing. I think it would be reasonable in the RST1, as you're presently envisioning it, to reflect on that in terms of an allowance of that narrow segment of the development agreement.
So just, again, speaking very personally, that's all, if we could carve out a narrow, adding a wing to the sanctuary, at kind of the same height and everything, that, to me, that's reasonable and practical sense. But the idea that, for example, and I think this is part of the conversation that's been had, Mr. Warren has talked about a new boutique hotel over there, and I don't think there would be support, a wing for the sanctuary, another 75-foot, another...
Totally agree, totally agree.
Yeah, okay.
Totally agree. That's why I singularly focused on the existing condition and its flexibility for it. I think it's worth reflecting on that, because that's been a considerable positive addition to our community that we have all benefited by, right? So I think that I totally agree, though, with if you introduce a completely new freestanding hotel. I totally agree.
Anyway, any other, yes, thank you, Mark. Mr. DiStefano.
Dave DiStefano, 31 Burroughs Hall. I'm going to rely on my last 35 years of practicing law and getting involved in some of these things. Right now, what we're talking about on those two parcels, we're talking about pretty much a single property owner, which is the resort. And I know from my practice in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, we use the term spot zoning. That sounds like spot zoning to me. If this was thousands of acres of property with 50 or 60 owners or whatever it is, it would make more sense. But basically, this zoning change of no parcels, the only effect it's going to be on the resort. And it's just, to me, it could almost border on a taking on some of those parcels. So I think you kind of got to look at that a little bit too, because, yeah, the development agreement's going to last for another 206 days, but that, I mean, what you're really doing is forcing them to go forward with something and get it approved in the next 206 days. So I just want to look at that aspect of it.
I appreciate that comment. I would just note that to the extent that one would could argue that this constitutes spot zoning, the development agreements themselves have arguably been rife with spot zoning. I mean, that was characterized, the resort, both the KP development agreement or the KRI development agreement as well as the KIGR development agreement.
Matt, can you illuminate any on what Mr. DiStefano just said?
I'm not going to do that in public session. We can have it.
Thank you.
Executive session.
Thank you, okay.
Can we have an emergency session today?
I mean, you're going to ask us to vote on this. I want council's opinion.
But this is first reading. This is not, we're not enacting this now. And you'll get his.
I would still like to have his opinion before I do a yay or a nay.
I don't know if we, I mean,
I don't think it's an emergency.
yeah, no, it's not.
Situation, yeah.
You can table it, I guess, and next month we have a executive session, or have a special call, you can table it, as a special call session, or just take it all up as the October meeting.
I'm happy moving forward,
So-
given that it's first reading.
Yes,
I think we should get to any legal advice we need, but with all deference to Mr. Berner,
As am I, but he can provide his view. I'm less concerned about the issue raised by Mr.
I know you
DiStefano.
would be, but I would like to hear.
No, I appreciate
Mr. DiStefano is an attorney, and he laid some certain groundwork. I want to hear from others as well.
I believe I understand what we're contemplating. It seemed like when we were taking a look at Captain Sam's rezoning and the zoning associated with that, this seemed to kind of come on the agenda. That's the first I heard about this. So I do think it requires more contemplation. an appreciation of the ramifications of what's going on. I've stood at that podium and advocated for less densification, so.
Well, you certainly did, and I was strongly supportive of that in the context of the rezoning of the beach walker.
I was.
This is much less in that regard.
I'm just saying that bus was clearly coming, and so we had time to consider it. I had time to prepare comments and thoughts. This seemed to come with the agenda that came out Friday. I was not aware of this in play before that, so I like the intent. I think we need more contemplation on it.
Yeah, Councilmember Kay, you popped up in front of me, I didn't know.
No, I am with Lance. This was new to me, and I have not had adequate time to go through, especially some of the nuances that have been raised. I think I need more time on this one.
Yeah, just procedural. I'm trying to think through how this is going to work in the future, because the Planning Commission has a very ambitious agenda tomorrow. They're going to be sending, so this is going to be kind of a regular thing, a cadence of Planning Commission recommendations coming to the council. So you're going to, unless you're paying attention, or everybody's paying attention to what the Planning Commission is doing, then yes, each one of these is going to be like that. And then we're never going to be able to kind of get anywhere.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I kind of agree with it. It's just what Mr. DeStefano raised with respect to spot zoning, I don't think would happen in what's coming. I'm not familiar with the legal aspects. I cannot approve it until I get other council input.
And I typically am on top of Planning Commission and at the meetings. I wasn't at the last one. I did not know the Planning Commission was embarking on what's going to be a rapid-fire set of zoning updates. So I will pay closer attention now that I know that, but I was not aware that was coming.
I mean, Joanne can speak for the commission. I think it would be an unfortunate characterization that these are rapid-fire.
Well, you just said there's going to be many more of them coming quickly.
Well, no, I'm just saying they've been working on all of these over a long period.
That translated to me as rapid fire. That you're talking about keeping pace with the ones that are coming to us.
Well, I guess what I mean is they've been spending a lot of time on this at various commission meetings. They've been going through their process. Then they finally finish that. It becomes a recommendation that comes to council at the next meeting. That's how the process works. So it's always going to be the case that a planning commission, after all of their work in multiple meetings, is going to be sending a recommendation to council for consideration at the next council meeting. That's what I mean.
We've been working on this for a while, and I think I like Mayor Belt's suggestion. You can approve this as a first reading. Before your next council meeting, you can have an executive session, and I don't think spot zoning's an issue here from other things I've done, but I'm not a lawyer, so I'll defer to the legal thing. But you can't, rather than delay it, you can approve it for first reading, get legal counsel, and if for some reason after your executive session you find this isn't appropriate, then you don't have to take it any farther. But rather than delay and delay and delay, because I just don't see the need. And just to give you a heads up, tomorrow we're doing an amendment to the parking table that, we started talking about over a year ago. And Luke, you may remember in some of our subcommittees on the comprehensive plan, but we didn't have any luck getting it moved forward in our last planning commission. This planning commission is doing a lot more to move things forward. So in your next meeting, you will be getting a recommendation to update the parking table. So just to give you a heads up on that. But I would go, it's up to you guys how you want to proceed. But I don't see any downside to going ahead with your first reading.
And you'll also be coming up with recommendations on plan development process?
Yes, there's a lot coming.
I think it would help at the next council meeting to have a rundown of all that, just so that we're aware of all the stuff that's being anticipated.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Just as a
sorry, that's
topic.
right.
You can also get the
We-
minutes.
I'm sorry, that's, I'm reminded by the town administrator that we are still in public hearing.
Oh.
So if I can entertain a motion to return to regular order in consideration of the Planning Commission's recommendation.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so, I mean, the issue is, we actually have a pending ordinance that's been recommended. I would entertain a motion for approval of the amendment on first reading. Is there a second?
Second?
There is a second. Now, further discussion, questions, and comments.
I just think that we're embarking on a more aggressive look at these things, and it'd be helpful to see what's coming in the next couple of months as a matter of a topic at the next council meeting. And I think we've also talked about how there's, how much time's left with the plan development? Is it 2 years, 1 year? I've heard different answers. 2?
2 years,
Just under
give
2.
or take.
So I'm not sure, I don't want to take it down to the wire like we did with Captain Sam Spit, but I do think we've got a month to be better informed on this.
So just food for thought. I appreciate Mr. Stefano's comment, but I think it's a little bit out of context or character here. Generally, spot zoning applies to a single property owner and one small tract of land. This is several different large tracts of land. It happens to be one property owner, but they're not contiguous. They're in different locations. They are in different purpose uses today, and we're just using one uniform. But just imagine, would it be different if you had 3 different hotels that were being rezoned like this, or 3 different owners would be rezoned? I don't think it's spot zoning when you look at several different parcels and several different locations.
Yeah, and I don't know if the town attorney wants to comment on this, but the classic example of what constitutes spot zoning is you change the use, the permitted use of one small parcel surrounded by all of the other parcels that don't allow that permitted use. And in that, for example, all residential, and then all of a sudden you single out one parcel to allow commercial and put in a tattoo parlor. That's a classic example of what constitutes spot zoning. That's just not what this is.
Just to clarify, I just want to give you all legal advice in executive session to protect the attorney-client privilege. I'm not saying he's right or y'all need to be careful. I have zero heartburn about y'all approving this at first reading, and we can certainly discuss it to address whatever concerns council may have at that time.
In which case, I wouldn't have a problem voting for this on first reading. And as a total editorial comment, I have to say that this planning commission has shown itself to be extremely well-intentioned and knowledgeable about the recommendations they're making to us. So even though I didn't dig into this one to the extent that I probably should have, I'm okay moving ahead with it.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Madeline. I mean, this planning commission has evinced over the course of the last several months a level of diligence and kind of thoughtful approach to these issues that has not necessarily characterized. I don't know. I want to go there. It just stand on its own.
Remember some of the people who were on those.
You were on those planning commissions, and try as you might sometimes. Is all I'll say is this planning commission has really rolled up its sleeves and to a person has been very, very thoughtful and deliberative.
And I'm not questioning the planning commission's actions or intentions at all.
Not at all.
I'm just thinking that, at face value, reviewing the staff package, there's a lot of technical, why do we review zoning? And what's the zoning thing? There's a lot of technical parameters in here, but I think the context and the underlying implications really didn't jump out of the prep packages the way I understood it. And we've reviewed a lot of zoning since I've been on council, and this is different. And I think it has different considerations that we need to be mindful of that wasn't clear based off of other zoning issues that we've taken action on.
And I also think that Lance, I think you're right, Lance. I'm just going to have to pay better attention and probably attend more planning commission meetings because there was no homework done for me on this, so I'll have to take it upon myself.
So I don't know if you guys did, but I was surprised at this last Thursday. I got a call from our planning director who said, do you have any questions about the materials? I can spend any amount of time you want to spend on it.
Yeah,
If he didn't call you guys, we
No,
should.
actually, John, he did call me. Again, I'll mea culpa this one. My bad for not digging into this.
And I got a call too. I didn't
Yeah,
walk out of that call
John
understanding
was
this
great
what was
about
going
that.
on.
So it helped me because I said, okay, well, I need to read this if it's going to be complicated where he's calling me in advance. So I did read this last Friday, so I kind of knew.
And I
it was
normally
coming.
go to planning commission meetings, just because I'm interested.
Okay, so you got a call and, okay.
I think you were at this planning commission.
Was I?
Yeah, I think so.
Just throw him under the bus, that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
No, John was very proactive in reaching out.
Yes.
So we have a pending motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of approving the Planning Commission's recommendation on first reading, recognizing that this is first reading, and to the extent appropriate, either the next council meeting or a special call meeting to get an executive session and advice of council on any matter of interest to members, we can pursue that. But that's the pending motion. All in favor?
Okay. Aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining.
I said aye.
Pardon?
I said aye. I thought you were looking.
4 ayes and an abstention. The motion carries. It's approved on.
Who abstained?
Russ did, I did.
Russell.
Councilman Vernon.
Thank you, got it.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Joanne. Next agenda item is under tab 5, approval of a town, a purchase of a town water vessel. Mr. Chairman of Ways and Means Committee, would you like to summarize the committee's actions earlier this morning?
Yes, so this morning at Ways and Means, we were presented with a recommendation to purchase a boat, a 21-foot water vessel, watercraft, as the mayor says, for multiple purposes to be used for town business, whether it's assisting with the marsh management plan, and whether it's to inspect the bridges from a building perspective, whether it's code enforcement to go out to Sandy Point, or any other uses we might need. There was a lot of analysis done, and Mr. Jordan did a great job presenting this. And we did approve at Ways and Means the purchase of a, not used, but a 2024 Rebello center console craft. Again, for all these purposes. It's an inshore craft and not an outshore, so it has a low freeboard that allows for safer access in and out of the marsh or in and out of docks or things like that. The intent is not to be used a lot in ocean rescue or this type of thing. It's really for the river purposes. It's not just to be used for wildlife, but for wildlife, for building inspection, for safety and enforcement. And this is a budgeted item. It was budgeted, and we can use some type of accommodation tax money to purchase this. So it fits.
Although it was budgeted out of general funds.
Budgeted out of general funds. So it was approved unanimously at Ways and Means, and we bring this to council for consideration. And he picked a pretty
Luke,
color,
I have a
too.
question.
Yes.
Can this boat go out onto the ocean?
Madeline, can I just, let's go ahead and move to approval. I would move approval of, or accept the Ways and Means Committee recommendation to approve a purchase of the boat.
So we can open it up for discussion then?
Yeah, so moved.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Now, discussion, questions? Yes, Madeline.
So is this an ocean-going vehicle? Can it stand I know it's going to be used primarily on the river, but could it go into the ocean if it needs to?
It can. What you don't want to do, it's not for foul weather, but for
Yeah.
normal sea conditions or certainly calm conditions, you can. If you wanted something you could go into foul weather, you'd have a very high, what's called freeboard. So the sides would be very tall. But this is intended primarily for river use, shallow water, but it can. And can be used in normal conditions. And he estimated 5 to 10% of the time would be needed to go ocean going. It does have a deep V hull, which is what you really want if you're going to go in choppy water or go in the ocean. It's not a flat bottom boat. So long answer, but yes, he considered a lot of different, and he did consider a deep hull boat or a high freeboard boat. But what they really wanted was something that had a low draft so they could operate at low tide in kind of some of the shallower creeks.
And to the point you're raising, I think if a boat were solely for use by the wildlife and natural resources team, their preference and recommendation would have actually been a much flatter, almost skiff-like boat, very, very shallow draft. That would have much less capability to navigate. But the expectation on this, because it does have some more freeboard, it does have at least somewhat of a V-hull, that, this could easily, if you're not going into really choppy waters, head out to the Edisto River along Sandy Point, circle around, up to a mile off the beach, and back up the river.
And this, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Madeline, I was going to say, and this boat is, the manufacturer generally makes ocean-going craft. So it's a reinforced fiberglass hull. It's not an aluminum hull like the other boat that they considered. And so the strength and integrity of the hull itself would take some beating from chop. But it's just something where it's not something you want to use if you're going to be predominantly in the ocean, but it can go in the ocean when needed and when necessary in moderate conditions.
I just have one, oh, go ahead.
I can think of 5 different scenarios that have arisen in the last 6 months of council meetings or committee meetings where I wished that we had this kind of a boat so we could go out and explore some of the issues that we've been tackling, including SGAs in our marine life. So from an environmental and resiliency and marsh perspective, I'm very supportive of this purchase.
All right, I just have one question. There's a confirmation with respect to the trailer. Under options, it references a standard trailer, second from the bottom, but it has a cost value of 0. I'm just assuming they're throwing that in, or is this without a trailer?
My understanding, subject to confirmation, but I believe the entire packaging, typically these do come with a trailer, and I think it's the trailer. I think what is being purchased is the actual boat, the image that was just provided you. It's that boat and that trailer. This isn't just an example of this.
Okay.
This is actually the vessel, and because it's a 24, I think the MSRP was like 82 or something, and it's
No,
this is 70.
Simply wanted to confirm.
Okay.
That's okay.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We've come to the end of new business. Citizens' comments. Anything else for the good of the order? Council member comments. Councilmember Berner.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Kay.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Farrell.
Again, I just wanted to acknowledge Ms. Tillerson's email to me last week or yesterday or whenever it was about kind of the hurricane preparedness and how we move off-site and who moves off-site and why that team is selected. It was a great email about how the town is going to manage itself in case there's an emergency evacuation and where people can be located and what needs to be communicated. So again, thank you very much, Stephanie.
Councilmember Spencer?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Nothing further from me, other than thanking everybody for a very thoughtful discussion as always, all the inputs from staff and from the community